Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto became king of Las Noches and fell in love with Herribel? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Saint. Ranger in the sands. The dimensional rift tore open like a wound in the fabric of reality, spilling violent chakra energy across the endless white desert. What began as a hairline crack in the air expanded into a gaping maw of swirling purple and blue energy. Lightning crackled along its edges as it destabilized, convulsing violently before expelling a single figure who crashed into the dunes below. Naruto Uzumaki hit the sand with enough force to create a small crater, his body tumbling and sliding to a stop. For several moments, he lay motionless under the perpetual crescent moon that illuminated the stark landscape. When consciousness finally returned, it came with a vengeance. Every muscle screamed in protest as he pushed himself to his knees, coughing up sand and blood. "What the hell?" he muttered, struggling to focus his vision. The last thing he remembered was the battlefield, Kagaya's dimensional attack tearing through space itself. He had pushed Sakura out of the way, and then, nothing. Just darkness and the sensation of being pulled apart and reassembled. Standing unsteadily, Naruto surveyed his surroundings. An endless expanse of white sand stretched to the horizon in every direction under a black sky. The air felt thin, almost hollow, carrying none of the scents or sounds he associated with the living world. "Hello," he called out, his voice swallowed by the vastness. "Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi-sensei." Only silence answered him. Naruto closed his eyes, attempting to sense any familiar chakra signatures, but instead encountered something altogether different, a spiritual pressure that permeated this realm, foreign yet somehow readable to his senses. Whatever this place was, it wasn't any dimension Kagaya had shown them before. A distant howl broke the silence, followed by another. Closer this time. Instinctively, Naruto's hand moved to his weapon's pouch. Despite his exhaustion, his body tensed for combat. The first creature emerged from behind a dune, a massive, wolf-like entity with a bone-white mask and a hole clean through its chest. Red eyes gleamed with hunger as it stalked forward, followed by two more of its kind approaching from different directions. "Definitely not summons," Naruto muttered. He formed a familiar hand sign, gathering what chakra he could. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 3 copies of himself appeared in puffs of smoke, each taking a defensive stance. The wolf creatures paused, seemingly confused by the sudden multiplication of their prey. The largest one recovered quickly, lunging toward the original Naruto with surprising speed. Its massive jaws snapped shut on empty air as Naruto leapt skyward, higher than should have been possible. He formed a swirling ball of energy in his palm as he descended. Rasengan. The spiraling sphere slammed into the creature's mask, cracking it down the middle. The beast let out an agonized roar before dissolving into particles of spirit energy. The other 2 creatures attacked his clones simultaneously. One clone ducked under snapping jaws and drove a kunai into the underside of the creature's mask, while the other clone met the third beast head-on with a flying kick that sent it tumbling across the sand. As the wounded creature struggled to right itself, Naruto felt a strange shift in the atmosphere, a heaviness that pressed down from all directions. His instincts screamed dang. A moment before a massive presence emerged from beneath the sand. It erupted like a leviathan breaching the ocean's surface, a centipede-like hollow nearly 30 feet long with a mask featuring multiple eye sockets and a jaw that split into 4 parts. Its segmented body crashed back onto the desert floor, sending up waves of sand in all directions. "That's a big problem," Naruto said, his clones regrouping around him. The remaining wolf hollows retreated, apparently aware they were outclassed by the new arrival. The giant hollow's roar shook the air itself as it lunged forward with frightening speed. Naruto and his clones scattered, barely avoiding being crushed. One clone wasn't fast enough, disappearing in a puff of smoke as a massive pincer caught its leg. Naruto landed atop a small dune. Quickly assessing the situation, he was tired, in an unknown world, and facing a creature that seemed to grow more aggressive with each passing second. "Time for something bigger. You guys keep it busy," he instructed his remaining clones, who nodded and dashed toward the creature from opposite directions. Naruto closed his eyes, tapping into the natural energy around him. It felt different here, thinner, more elusive, but still present. As he gathered it, orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes. When he opened them again, they had transformed into the golden cross-shaped pupils of Sage Mode. The centipede hollow had just crushed his second clone when Naruto made his move. His speed now vastly enhanced, he appeared directly above the creature's mask, a massive Rasengan forming. Between his hands, larger and more densely packed with energy than before. Giant Rasengan. The impact created a shockwave that rippled across the desert. The hollow's mask shattered completely, and its body began to disintegrate from the point of impact outward. Naruto landed in a crouch as the last particles of the creature scattered on the non-existent wind. What were those things? He wondered aloud, allowing Sage Mode to fade as he caught his breath. His remaining clone approached. Whatever they are, I'm guessing there are more where they came from. Yeah, Naruto nodded, looking around. We need to find shelter. Figure out where we... The words died in his throat as he sensed a new presence, multiple presences, actually, approaching rapidly. Unlike the bestial energy of the creatures he'd just fought, these signatures felt more refined, powerful, but controlled. Company, his clone warned unnecessarily. Disappear, Naruto ordered. Let's not show all our cards yet. The clone vanished with a nod, and Naruto turned to face the approaching figures. 3 individuals emerged from the distortion of a sonito, landing gracefully on the sand several yards away. Women, Herribel, Zed, each with fragments of bone-like material on their bodies and holes similar to the creatures he'd fought. At their center stood a tall, dark-skinned woman with blonde hair and piercing teal eyes. The lower half of her face was concealed behind a high collar, and her attire left little to the imagination while still conveying an unmistakable air of authority. The fragment of mask covering her face did nothing to diminish the intensity of her gaze as she assessed him. Interesting, she said, her voice calm but carrying easily across the distance. Not a Shinigami, yet clearly not an ordinary human. Naruto straightened, wincing slightly at his still aching muscles. I could say the same about you. Not exactly local wildlife, are you? A thin woman with long, olive-colored hair stepped forward, indignation flashing across her features. Watch your tongue. You stand before Herribel, Trace Espada of Mila Rose, the blonde woman. Herribel cut her off with a subtle gesture. That title no longer applies. Not since Aizen's defeat. Naruto noted the flash of emotion that crossed all 3 women's faces at the mention of this Aizen person. History there, clearly. Herribel approached him, her spiritual pressure washing over him like a controlled tide, powerful but not overtly threatening. You dispatched an Ijuka's class hollow with surprising ease. What are you? Name's Naruto Uzumaki. I'm a shinobi from Konohagakure. He paused, recognizing from their blank expressions that this meant nothing to them. I'm guessing that doesn't ring any bells. Konohagakure, repeated the third woman. A dark-skinned beauty with short, spiky hair. Never heard of such a place in the world of the living. That's because it's not from this dimension, Herribel stated, her eyes never leaving Naruto. The spiritual disturbance we felt, it was a dimensional tear. Naruto blinked in surprise. You know about dimensional travel. We know enough, Herribel replied. Hawako Mundo borders many realms, and the boundaries have been unstable recently. She studied him for another moment before continuing. You're injured, exhausted, and likely have no idea where you are or how to return home. Come with us to Las Noches. At the very least, we can offer shelter while you recover. Mila Rose looked alarmed. Herribel-sama, is that wise? We know nothing about him. I know he dispatched a hollow that would have given most lieutenants trouble, and he did it while already wounded, Herribel replied evenly. Better to have such power under observation than wandering the desert. Besides, her eyes narrowed slightly. Something tells me his arrival is no coincidence. Naruto hesitated. These people, whatever they were, didn't seem immediately hostile, and he had few options in this strange desert wasteland. Plus, the blonde woman intrigued him. There was a quiet strength about her that reminded him of Tsunade, though with none of the Hokage's explosive temperament. Lead the way, he finally agreed. But fair warning, I've had bad experiences with people offering hospitality in strange dimensions. A hint of what might have been amusement flickered in Herribel's eyes. Noted. Apache, Mila Rose, Sung Sun, were returning to Las Noches. The dark-haired woman, apparently Apache, scowled. Are we seriously babysitting this Ryoka? Would you prefer I left you here to handle tea? He Vasto Lord approaching from the east. Herribel asked calmly. Naruto sensed it too, a massive spiritual pressure lurking just beyond the horizon. Far stronger than anything he'd encountered so far. No, Herribel-sama, Apache muttered. Chastened, Herribel turned to Naruto. Can you keep up? In answer, he channeled chakra to his feet and rose slightly above the sand. Try me. Without another word, Herribel and her companions vanished in bursts of sonito. Naruto followed, pushing his tired body to match their speed. As they raced across the endless desert, the crescent moon hanging motionless above. He couldn't help but wonder what new dangers awaited at this, Las Noches, and whether he'd just made a terrible mistake. Las Noches materialized on the horizon like a mirage, a massive WHITE fortress that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its central dome stretched impossibly high, surrounded by several massive towers and enclosed by a wall that must have been miles long in circumference. That's big, Naruto commented as they approached, trying to mask how the extended high-speed travel had drained his already depleted reserves. Las Noches is large enough to have its own weather systems, Sung Sun explained. Speaking for the first time since they'd met. Her voice was soft but carried a hint of pride. The dome covers an area so vast that it maintains an artificial daylight beneath it. As they drew closer, Naruto noticed signs of recent damage, massive gouges in the outer walls, sections of the dome that had been hastily repaired, and areas where the pristine white stone had been scorched black. Looks like you had quite a battle here, he observed. The Winter War, Herribel confirmed without elaborating further. This way, they passed through a massive gateway that seemed designed for giants rather than humanoids. Inside, Naruto found himself in a network of vast corridors, all constructed from the same white stone. Despite the fortress's enormous size, THEY encountered remarkably few inhabitants. Just the occasional white-clad figure who would bow respectfully to Herribel before continuing on their way, casting curious or suspicious glances at Naruto. Not exactly a bustling metropolis, he noted after several minutes of walking. Many Urankar died in the war, Herribel replied. Others fled when Aizen fell. What remains is complicated. They turned into a large chamber that appeared to serve as some kind of throne room. A simple stone chair sat on a raised dais at the far end, but it was the gathering of individuals before it that caught Naruto's attention. About a dozen Urankar stood in what appeared to be two distinct groups, tension visible in their postures. Conversation ceased as Herribel entered, all eyes turning toward them. A tall, lanky Urankar with a fragment of mask covering his left eye stepped forward, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. Herribel-sama, we were beginning to worry. The spiritual disturbance, he broke off, noticing Naruto. Who is this intruder? This is Naruto Uzumaki, Herribel introduced. He appears to have been transported here from another dimension entirely. I've brought him to Las Noches for observation and recovery. A muscular Urankar with short, spiky blue hair scoffed. Another pet project. We have more pressing concerns than babysitting dimensional tourists. Such as your continued attempts to claim authority you haven't earned, Valeron. Sung Sun interjected, her tone deceptively mild. The blue-haired Urankar, Valeron, narrowed his eyes. I speak only of our survival. Las Noches needs leadership, structure. The power vacuum left by Aizen endangers us all. Which is precisely what we were discussing before you departed, Herribel-sama, the lanky Urankar explained. Shooting Valeron a warning glance. Reports of organized hollow attacks have increased. Someone or something is coordinating them. Herribel's expression remained unreadable. We will address these concerns, Lucian. But first, she turned to Naruto. You require rest and recovery. Apache will show you to quarters where you can clean up and eat. We can discuss your situation more thoroughly afterward. Naruto sensed the dismissal but also recognized the political tension in the room. Whatever was happening in Las Noches, his arrival had interrupted something important. Apache looked less than thrilled with her assignment but gestured for him to follow. As they left the throne room, Naruto heard the discussions resume behind them, Valeron's voice rising in clear disagreement with whatever Herribel had proposed. So, Naruto said as they walked down another endless white corridor, what's the deal with tall, blue, and angry back there? Apache snorted. Valeron thinks he should be running Las Noches. He commanded one of the external fortresses under Aizen, and now he's gathered followers who believe strength alone should determine leadership. And Herribel doesn't agree. Ha! Rebel Sama believes in survival through unity, Apache replied, a fierce loyalty evident in her voice. She's the strongest remaining Espada, but she doesn't rule through fear or domination. That's why some see her as weak. But not you. Apache stopped, fixing him with an intense gaze. Herribel Sama saved me when I was nothing, a mindless Ijukas barely clinging to consciousness. She gave me purpose, identity. She did the same for Mila Rose and Sung Sun. We are her Fracken, her sworn protectors and companions. Her expression hardened. So whatever game you're playing by appearing here now, just know that we're watching you. Naruto held up his hands. No game. I'm as confused about being here as you are about having me. I was in the middle of a war in my own world when something tore open reality and dumped me in your sandbox. For a moment, Apache studied him, searching for deception. Then she resumed walking. These will be your quarters, she said, stopping before a door that looked identical to dozens they had passed. There's a bathing facility inside, and food will be brought to you. Don't wander. The layout of Las Noches is designed to confuse intruders, and some areas are still unstable from the battle. Thanks for the hospitality, Naruto replied, only half sarcastic. After the day he'd had, even a cell would have been welcome as long as it came with a bed. Apache narrowed her eyes. Don't thank me. Thank Herribel Sama for her mercy. Many here would have left you to the hollows. With that, she turned and strode away, leaving Naruto alone at the threshold of his new accommodations. The room beyond was surprisingly comfortable, Spartan but adequate, with a bed, a small table with chairs, and a separate bathing area. After cleaning himself up and changing to the white garments that had been left for him similar to what the Arrancar wore, though without the unique modifications each seemed to favor, Naruto sat cross-legged on the bed and attempted to make sense of his situation. Meditation had never been his strong suit, but sage training had taught him the value of stillness. He closed his eyes, extending his senses throughout Las Noches. The ritual energy here was different from chakra but not entirely dissimilar. It flowed in currents, concentrated around certain individuals. Herribel's signature was particularly distinct, a cool, deep ll of power that reminded him of the ocean. Beyond the walls of Las Noches, the desert teemed with hungry presences, hollows, he presumed, like the ones he had encountered. And somewhere, at the very edge of his perception, something else lingered, watching, waiting. Something that felt neither hollow nor Arrancar, but somehow, familiar. A knock at the door broke his concentration. Enter, he called, opening his eyes. The door slid open to reveal the lanky Arrancar from earlier, Lucian, carrying a tray of food. Herribel Sama requested I bring you this personally, he explained, setting the tray on the table. She also asked me to answer any questions you might have about Hueco Mundo. Naruto moved to the table, suddenly aware of his hunger. The food was simple but looked edible, some kind of meat, bread, and what appeared to be fruit, though nothing he recognized from home. Thanks, he said, digging in without ceremony. Between bites, he asked, so what exactly are you people? You're clearly not like those masked monsters in the desert, but you have similar parts. He gestured vaguely toward the fragment of mask on Lucian's face. Lucian sat across from him, folding his hands on the table. We are Arrancar, hollows who have removed their masks and gained Shinigami-like powers. The hollows you encountered are our less evolved kin, you might say. And Herribel, she seems different from the others. Perceptive, Lucian acknowledged with a slight nod. Cheer Herribel was the Tercera Espada, the third strongest among Aizen's elite Arrancar army. Now, she is likely the most powerful being in Hueco Mundo. Though she refuses to claim the title of queen or ruler. Naruto considered this as he continued eating. This Aizen person keeps coming up. I'm guessing he was bad news. Sosuke Aizen was a Shinigami captain who betrayed Soul Society, the realm of the death gods, to pursue his ambitions. He sought to overthrow the Soul King and recreate the world in his image. He used Las Noches as his base of operations and created an army of Arrancar through artificial means. And now he's gone, defeated by a Shinigami substitute named Ichigo Kurosaki, Lucian confirmed. But his absence has left a power vacuum that threatens the stability of Hueco Mundo. Many factions vie for control, and outside forces have begun to take interest in our realm. Naruto finished his meal, pushing the tray aside. And where does Herribel stand in all this? Lucian's expression turned thoughtful. Herribel seeks balance. She believes that without Aizen's protection, our only hope for survival is cooperation. But such ideals are uncommon among hollows, who exist in a natural state of constant consumption and evolution through combat. Sounds familiar, Naruto muttered, thinking his own world's endless cycle of conflict. I should warn you, Lucian continued, his voice lowering slightly, your arrival has stirred considerable interest. Some see you as a potential ally, others as a threat. And still others as a valuable resource. These are dangerous times in Las Noches, Naruto Uzumaki. Tread carefully. Before Naruto could respond, a tremendous crash echoed through the fortress, followed by a spike of spiritual pressure that made both of them tense. What was that? Naruto demanded, already on his feet. Lucian's expression darkened. Trouble. He moved to the door with surprising speed. Stay here. Las Noches is under attack. Naturally, Naruto did exactly the opposite. By the time Naruto navigated the confusing corridors to the source of the disturbance, the battle was already well underway. He emerged onto a massive balcony overlooking what appeared to be an internal courtyard large enough to contain a small village. Below, dozens of Arrancar fought against a swarm of invading hollows. Not the mindless beasts he had encountered in the desert, but organized, tactical fighters working in coordinated groups. At the center of the courtyard, Herribel aced off against a towering hollow at least 15 feet tall. Unlike the others, this one wore fragments of armor that seemed grafted to its body, and its mask bore intricate red markings. Herribel of the Three Seas. The creature's voice boomed across the courtyard. Your time as steward of Las Noches ends today. My master claims this fortress as the cornerstone of the new order. Your master lacks both the courage to face me himself and the wisdom to understand what he seeks, Herribel replied, her voice carrying despite its measured tone. Leave now, and I will spare those who follow you. The armored hollow laughed, a grating, metallic sound. Always the negotiator, always seeking compromise. This is why you will fall. With frightening speed, it lunged forward, a massive blade materializing in its hand. Herribel met the attack with her own Zanpakuto, the clash sending shockwaves through the courtyard. All around them, Arrancar and invading hollows were locked in combat, with Val Eren and his followers conspicuously absent from the defense. Naruto spotted Apache, Mila Rose, and Sung Sun fighting back to back against a group of smaller but nimble attackers. Though they moved with impressive coordination, they were clearly outnumbered. As he watched, one of the attackers slipped past Sung Sun's guard, its claws raking across her arm. Decision made, Naruto leapt from the balcony, channeling chakra to soften his landing in the midst of the battle. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A dozen clones appeared around him, immediately engaging the nearest enemies. The hollows reacted with confusion to this new threat, their formation momentarily broken. Naruto used the opening to reach Herribel's Frakken, a Rasengan forming in his palm as he drove back the hollow that had wounded Sung Sun. What are you doing here? Apache demanded, even as she dispatched another attacker. This isn't your fight. Looks like it is now, Naruto replied, his clone dispersing an attacking hollow with a well-placed kick. Besides, I hate bullies, whatever dimension they're from. Mila Rose scoffed but didn't refuse the assistance as more enemies closed in. Together, they formed a defensive perimeter, gradually pushing back against the invaders. Naruto found that his shadow clones were particularly effective against the hollows, who seemed unused to fighting multiple identical opponents. Across the courtyard, Herribel was holding her own against the armored leader, but Naruto could see she was being deliberately drawn away from the main fortress. A distraction, he realized, but for what? The answer came in the form of a massive explosion from one of the upper towers. Through the smoke, several figures emerged carrying what appeared to be a large crystalline object. The Hogyoku fragment, Sung Sun gasped. Thereafter it. The what? Naruto asked, dispatching another hollow with a Rasengan. A powerful artifact left from Aizen's experiments, Mila Rose explained grimly. If they get it beyond Los Noches walls, on it. Naruto interrupted. He formed a cross with his fingers, channeling more chakra despite his fatigue. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. This time, 50 clones appeared, spreading throughout the courtyard. Half engaged the remaining attackers, while the others formed a living ladder up the side of the fortress toward the damaged tower. The original Naruto turned to Herribel's Fracken. Keep these guys busy. I'll get your crystal thing back. Without waiting for a response, he raced across the courtyard, using fallen debris as stepping stones to gain height. As he approached the tower, he caught sight of the thieves, 3 Arankar-like beings with modified masks that covered their entire faces. They moved with incredible speed along the exterior of the fortress. The crystal object clutched by the leader. Naruto's clones intercepted them at a narrow walkway between towers. The thieves skidded to a halt, clearly surprised by the identical figures blocking their path. Hand over the shiny rock. And nobody gets hurt, one clone offered cheerfully. The lead thief snarled something unintelligible and gestured to his companions. They drew their Zanpakuto simultaneously. Spiritual pressure surging around them. Reap, Segador, Pierce, Auha, Consume, Devorador. Their transformations were instantaneous and grotesque, one sprouting scythe-like appendages, another growing needle-like protrusions across his body, and the third's jaw extending to reveal rows of serrated teeth. Well, that's new, a clone muttered before the fight erupted. The battle the narrow walkway was chaotic and desperate. Naruto's clones had numbers, but the released Arankar had raw power that dispelled clones with each hit. The original Naruto hung back, studying their movements and looking for an opening. The leader, the one with scythe arms, proved particularly dangerous, cutting through clones with ease while keeping the crystal tucked against his body. As their numbers dwindled, the clones were forced to adopt more desperate tactics, some sacrificing themselves to create openings for others. Naruto seized his chance when the needle-covered Arankar overextended, leaving a gap in their defense. Channeling wind-natured chakra into his palm, he formed a Rasengan that extended into a shuriken-like shape. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. The technique tore through the air with a high-pitched screech, catching the needle Arankar directly in the chest. Instead of cutting through him, however, the Rasenshuriken expanded into a dome of countless microscopic blades, shredding the Arankar at a cellular level. His screams cut off abruptly as he disintegrated into spirit particles. The remaining 2 thieves faltered, clearly shocked by the display of power. The toothed one turned to flee, abandoning his companion, but ran directly into Herribel, who had somehow disengaged from her own battle and appeared on the walkway behind them. Disappointing, she said Q-U-I-E-T-L-Y before striking with terrifying precision. Her Zanpakuto sliced clean through his released form, and he too dissolved into spirit particles. The leader, now alone, clutched the crystal tighter and backed away. Trapped between Naruto and Herribel. This changes nothing, he hissed. My master has already set events in motion. The boundaries between worlds grow thinner every day. Who is your master? Herribel demanded, her blade at the ready. The scythe-armed Arankar laughed. The one who walks between dimensions. The one who sees the cracks in reality that even Aizen missed. His eyes fixed on Naruto. The one who guided your arrival, Shinobi. Before either could question him further, he raised the crystal high. If I cannot deliver it, then no one shall have it. Naruto lunged forward as the Arankar brought one scythe arm down toward the crystal, but he wasn't going to make it in time. Then, in a blur of motion almost too fast to follow, Herribel appeared between them. Her Zanpakuto cleaved through the Arankar's arm at the elbow, and her free hand caught the falling crystal. The Arankar howled in pain and rage, his remaining scythe swinging wildly toward Herribel's unprotected back. Without thinking, Naruto threw himself forward, catching the blade with his forearm. Pain lanced through him as the edge bit deep, but he held firm, giving Herribel the moment she needed to pivot and deliver a fatal strike. As the last thief dissolved, silence fell over the walkway. Below, the sounds of battle had already begun to fade, the remaining invaders either defeated or retreating. Naruto winced as he examined his arm. The wound was deep, blood flowing freely down to his fingertips. That was reckless, Herribel observed, though her tone lacked condemnation. Says the W. Oman who jumped between a crazy guy and his crystal, Naruto countered with a pained grin. To his surprise, the corner of Herribel's eyes crinkled slightly, the closest thing to a smile he'd seen from her. She carefully tucked the crystal into her attire, then approached him. Let me see your arm. Naruto extended it, trying not to show how much it hurt. Herribel examined the wound with clinical detachment. The blade carried a toxin. She noted, it's already spreading. Now that she mentioned it, Naruto could feel an unnatural burning sensation extending from the wound up his arm. He concentrated, drawing on the Nine Tails chakra to counteract the poison. Golden energy flickered around the injury, and he felt Kurama's power working to neutralize the foreign substance. Herribel's eyes widened slightly. What is that power? Long story, Naruto replied as the wound began to close. Involves a fox demon sealed inside me at birth. You know, typical childhood stuff. Before Herribel could respond, Apache, Mila rose. And Sung Sun arrived on the walkway, looking battered but victorious. The attackers have been repelled, Sung Sun reported. Those that survived have fled beyond the walls. And the Hogyoku fragment? Mila Rose asked, eyeing Herribel expectantly. In answer, Herribel produced the crystal. It pulsed with an inner light, emitting a subtle but persistent spiritual pressure that made Naruto's skin crawl. What exactly is that thing? He asked, flexing his now-healed arm. A fragment of Aizen's failed attempt to recreate the Hogyoku, an artifact of immense power, Herribel explained. This piece retained only a fraction of the original's abilities, but it remains dangerous in the wrong hands. Speaking of wrong hands, Apache interjected, Valeron and his follower were nowhere to be found during the attack. Convenient, don't you think? Herribel's expression darkened. Indeed, Lucian is investigating now. She turned to Naruto, her gaze appraising. You foe. Well for someone still recovering from dimensional travel. Your powers are unusual. I get that a lot, Naruto admitted. Though I could say the same about all of you. This isn't exactly the strangest day of my life. But it's definitely in the top 5. A ghost of amusement flickered across Herribel's features again. Return to your quarters and rest. We will speak more tomorrow. She turned to leave, then paused. And Naruto Uzumaki, thank you for your assistance. It was unexpected. As she walked away, her fracken following close behind, Naruto couldn't help but feel he'd just passed some sort of test. What that meant for his future in this strange realm, however, remained to be seen. In the days that followed, Naruto found himself gradually integrated into the daily life of Las Noches. His quarters became less of a monitored confinement and more of a personal space as he earned a measure of trust. Herribel's fracken remained wary but no longer openly hostile, and of the other Arankar began to acknowledge him with nods or brief greetings rather than suspicious glares. Lucian proved a valuable source of information about Hueco Mundo and its neighboring dimensions, Soul Society, the world of the living, and the mysterious Dongai Precipice world that connected them. The more Naruto learned, the more he suspected that his arrival was, as the dying thief had suggested, no accident. On the 5th day, as he was exploring the outer courtyards with Lucian's permission, he encountered Herribel training alone in what appeared to be a specialized combat arena. She moved through forms with her Zanpakuto that were both powerful and precise, her spiritual pressure controlled but palpable. Naruto paused at the entrance, uncertain whether to interrupt or continue on his way. Before he could decide, Herribel spoke without breaking her rhythm. You may enter if you wish. I am nearly finished. Taking the invitation, Naruto stepped into the arena, appreciating the simple elegance of the space, a circular platform surrounded by pillars that presumably served to contain the spiritual pressure released during more intense training. Sorry to intrude, he offered. I was just exploring. Herribel completed her form before sheathing her Zanpakuto at her back. How is your arm? Completely healed, Naruto confirmed, demonstrating by rotating it freely. The fox has its uses. This fox entity within you, Herribel said, approaching him. It is similar to our Zanpakuto spirits, yet different. Kurama, that's his name, is a tailed beast from my world. 9 of them exist, each with a different number of tails representing their power level. He's the strongest, the 9 tails. And he was sealed within you as a child. There was something in her tone, not quite sympathy, but a recognition of hardship. Naruto nodded. Yeah, my father did it to save our village. Growing up with a demon fox inside you isn't exactly the path to popularity, but... He shrugged. We've come to an understanding over the years. Herribel seemed to consider this. In Hueco Mundo, power often comes at great cost. Those who achieve it through suffering tend to use it more wisely than those who are simply born to it. Is that what happened to you? Naruto asked, then immediately regretted his directness. Sorry, that's probably too personal. No, Herribel replied after a moment. It is a fair question. I evolved as a hollow by consuming others, as all of us did. But I learned early that senseless violence and domination led only to more of the same. I sought to protect those weaker than myself. To build something sustainable rather than simply destroy. Which is why Aizen recruited you. A shadow passed over Herribel's expression. Aizen recognized my power, but misunderstood my nature. He saw my desire to protect as a weakness to exploit rather than a strength to nurture. In the end, when I was no longer useful, he cut me down without hesitation. Naruto's eyes widened. He attacked you, his own ally. Such is the nature of those who seek power for its own sake, Herribel replied evenly. I survived only because the Shinigami healer, Hana, found me worthy of saving. And now you're trying to build something different here, Naruto observed. Something not based on fear or control. A difficult task among beings whose very nature is predatory, Herribel acknowledged. But not impossible. Even hollows can evolve beyond their base instincts. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sung Sun, who bowed respectfully before addressing Herribel. Forgive the intrusion, Herribel-sama, but Lucian has returned from his investigation. He brings troubling news. Herribel nodded. We will come immediately. As they followed Sung Sun through the corridors of Las Noches, Naruto found himself walking alongside Herribel rather than behind her. A subtle but significant change in status that didn't go unnoticed by the Arrancar they passed. The meeting took place in a smaller chamber adjacent to the throne room, with only key individuals present. Lucian, Herribel's 3 Frakken, and a few other Arrancar Naruto recognized as her loyal supporters. Notably absent were Valeron and his faction. Report, Herribel commanded once the doors were sealed. Lucian stepped forward, his usually composed demeanor tense. The attack was more coordinated than we initially believed. The invaders had detailed knowledge of Las Noches defenses and the location of the Hogyoku fragment. They also specifically timed their attack to coincide with the dimensional disturbance that brought our guest. He nodded toward Naruto. Internal assistance? Herribel asked, though it sounded more like confirmation than question. Without doubt, Lucian confirmed. I've tracked communications between Valeron's faction and an external party. They're planning something significant, and soon. What about this, Master? The thief mentioned. Naruto interjected. The one who supposedly arranged my trip here. That remains unclear, Lucian admitted. But there have been reports from across Hueco Mundo of dimensional anomalies, places where the barrier between realms has grown thin. Some Arrancar claim to have glimpsed other worlds through these tiers. Worlds unlike Soul Society are the world of the living. And what of the increased hollow coordination? Herribel pressed. These are not isolated incidents anymore. No, Lucian agreed grimly. Something or someone is organizing the normally solitary Mainos and Ijukas into coordinated packs. They, being provided with artificial armor and weapons similar to those used by the attackers. The technology resembles Aizen's work, but with differences that suggest a new intelligence behind it. Naruto frowned. When I was meditating, I sensed something at the edge of the desert, a presence that felt like it was watching Las Noches. Could that be your mystery mastermind? Herribel turned to him. Can you locate this presence again? Probably, if I get close enough, Naruto confirmed. My sage mode enhances my sensory abilities. If they're still out there, I can find them. Herribel considered this for a moment. We need more information before Valeron makes his move. A scouting mission to locate this observer may provide the advantage we need. She turned to her Frakken. Prepare for an expedition into the deeper desert. We leave at nightfall. Herribel-sama, Lucian protested, is it wise for you to leave Las Noches now? Valeron may be waiting for precisely such an opportunity. Quote, which is why you and the others will maintain the appearance that I am still here, Herribel replied. My fracken, Naruto, and I will move quietly. The fewer who know of our mission, the better our chances of success. The meeting concluded with detailed preparations for both the expedition and the defense of Las Noches in their absence. As the others dispersed to their assignments, Herribel approached Naruto. This mission carries significant risk, she said bluntly. You are under no obligation to participate. Naruto met her gaze steadily. Look, I may be a visitor here, but I'm not one to sit on the sidelines when things get tough. Besides, whatever's happening might be my ticket home, or at least help me understand why I'm here. Herribel studied him for a moment, then nodded. Your assistance is appreciated. Meet us at the eastern gate at nightfall. Come prepared for combat. As she turned to leave, Naruto called after her. Herribel. When she paused, he continued, why do you trust me? I could be part of this whole scheme for all you know. Herribel looked back, her teal eyes unreadable. I do not trust easily, Naruto Uzumaki. But I have observed you. You fought to protect those who offered you nothing but suspicion. You risked yourself for people not your own. Such actions reveal more about a person than any words could. With that, she departed, leaving Naruto with Ch to consider as he prepared for the coming mission. What neither of them noticed was the small, bat-like creature perched in the shadows of a high window, watching, listening, and transmitting everything it observed to its distant master. The expedition departed Las Noches as planned, under cover of the perpetual night that blanketed Hueco Mundo. Herribel led the way, with Apache, Mila Rose, and Sung Sun forming a protective triangle around her. Naruto brought up the rear, his senses extended to detect any pursuit or ambush. They traveled in silence for the first few hours, moving swiftly across the endless dunes. Occasionally, they would sense hollows in the distance, but none approached, whether out of caution or some other motive, Naruto couldn't tell. As they ventured deeper into the desert, the landscape began to change subtly. The dunes gave way to flat plains of hardened white sand, and strange crystalline formations jutted from the ground like frozen trees. The spiritual pressure here felt different, thicker, more oppressive. We're entering the forest of Manos, Herribel explained when they paused briefly. A realm beneath the desert where the more powerful hollows gather. If your mysterious observer is directing hollow activities, this would be a logical place to establish control. Naruto nodded, closing his eyes to concentrate. Give me a minute to gather natural energy. He sat cross-legged on the sand, perfectly still as he entered sage mode. With his enhanced senses, the spiritual landscape of Hueco Mundo became much clearer. He could feel the hollow signatures below them in the forest, hundreds. Perhaps thousands of them, moving in strange patterns that seemed almost purposeful. And there, at the very edge of his awareness, the presence he had sensed before, like a void in the spiritual fabric, absorbing rather than emitting energy. It felt cold, ancient, and somehow familiar in a way Naruto couldn't quite place. His eyes snapped open, now displaying the horizontal pupils of sage mode. Got it. About 15 miles east, near what feels like a massive hollow in the spiritual layer of this place. A Garganta Nexus, Herribel realized. A nature. Al point where the barrier between dimensions is thinnest. That can't be coincidence, Sung Sun observed. No, Herribel agreed. If someone is manipulating dimensional boundaries, such a location would amplify their abilities. She turned to Naruto. Can you determine how many are there? It's hard to say, Naruto admitted, rising to his feet. The main presence I sense is powerful but contained somehow. Around it are maybe a dozen others, plus what seems like a small army of hollows. A frontal approach would be suicide, Mila Rose stated flatly. Then we don't approach from the front, Naruto suggested. I can send shadow clones ahead as scouts. They'll gather information without risking our actual presence. Herribel considered this. Do it, but maintain distance. If this entity can sense dimensional energy, it might detect your clones if they get too close. Naruto formed 6 shadow clones, each receiving silent instructions before they scattered in different directions, using transformation techniques to mimic the appearance of local hollows. As the clones departed, the main group continued their approach more cautiously, using the crystalline formations for cover. They had traveled perhaps another 5 miles when Naruto suddenly stiffened, a flood of information returning to him as one of his clones dispersed. "We've got trouble," he announced. "One of my clones foe. Signs of a large force moving toward Los Noches from the west, not hollows, but Arankar. They're wearing armor similar to what the attackers had." "Valeron," Apache growled. "He's making his move, and drawing our defenders away from the eastern approach," Herribel concluded. "A diversion. There's more," Naruto continued as another clone's memories reached him. "The area around the Nexus is being prepared for some kind of ritual. They've constructed a circle of pillars with symbols carved into them, not like anything I've seen here so far." Herribel's expression darkened. "We need to see this for ourselves. If they're attempting to artificially widen a Garganta, the consequences could destabilize all neighboring dimensions." Sung Sun finished for her. "What about Los Noches?" Mila Rose asked. "If Valeron attacks, Lucian is prepared," Herribel assured her. "And our mission has become more urgent. We continue east." They increased their pace, using Sonito and chakra-enhanced speed to cover ground rapidly. As they drew closer to the Nexus, Naruto felt the spiritual pressure growing more distorted, as if the very fabric of this dimension was being stretched and twisted. Finally, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast crater in the desert floor. What they saw below froze them in their tracks. The crater contained what appeared to be an ancient ruin, remnants of structures that predated Los Noches by millennia. Half buried in the sand, at its center stood a perfect circle of 12 obsidian pillars, each carved with glowing symbols that pulsed in synchronized rhythm. Between the pillars, the air itself seemed to warp and distort, occasional flashes of other landscapes briefly visible through tears in reality. But it was the figure at the center of the circle that drew Naruto's attention. Tall and slender, dressed in flowing white robes with intricate black patterns, the being appeared almost human except for the crystalline growths that emerged from its shoulders and crown like a natural armor. Its face was hidden behind a mask unlike any hollows, a smooth, featureless oval with a single vertical line down its center. Around the circle, Arankar in modified armor worked at various devices that appeared to be stabilizing the dimensional tiers. And patrolling the perimeter were dozens of hollows wearing the same artificial armor they had seen during the attack on Los Noches. "What is that?" Naruto whispered, indicating the central figure. Herribel's eyes narrowed. "Not Arankar, not Shinigami, and not hollow. I have never seen such a being before. The symbols on the pillars," Sung Sun observed. "They resemble the script used in some of Aizen's forbidden research, experiments related to the Okayan and the dimensional barriers. Whatever they're doing, it's affecting the stability of Hueco Mundo," Naruto noted, feeling the fluctuations in the natural energy around them. "It's like they're thinning the walls between worlds. We need to disrupt their ritual," Herribel decided. "Apache, Mila Rose, Sung Sun, we will target the pillars simultaneously. Naruto, your shadow clones can create a diversion to draw away the guards." Naruto frowned, studying the scene below. "There's something else we should consider. That central figure, it's the presence I've been sensing, but it's not exerting itself at all. It's almost like it's waiting for something. Or someone," Herribel said quietly. Before they could discuss further, a tremendous spiritual pressure washed over them, familiar, hostile, and approaching fast. "We've been found," Mila Rose warned, drawing her Zanpakuto. They turned to see Valeron approaching across the dunes, accompanied by at least 20 of his followers. His blue hair seemed to glow in the moonlight, and his expression was one of triumphant malice. "Herribel," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "How considerate of you to save us the trouble of dragging you here." Herribel stood, her hand moving to her Zanpakuto. "So this was your plan all along? Not to take Los Noches, but to deliver me to whatever entity conducts this ritual?" "Los Noches is merely a fortress," Valeron replied with a dismissive gesture. "What my master offers is far greater, a new order for Hueco Mundo, one that extends across all dimensions. The age of fragmented realms is ending, Herribel. Either adapt or perish." "You've seen these rituals before," Herribel realized. "The coordinated hollows, the dimensional disturbances, you've been part of this from the beginning." Valeron smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "For longer than you know." Aizen was merely a stepping stone. His research provided the foundation, but my master has perfected what that arrogant Shinigami could only theorize. He drew his Zanpakuto, a curved blade that gleamed dully in the moonlight. Now, you can come willingly and serve as the catalyst for the next phase, or we can take you by force. Either way, your spiritual energy will feed the convergence. Naruto stepped forward, chakra already swirling around him. Sorry, but Herribel isn't on the menu today. If your master wants to mess with dimensions, he can find another battery. Valeron's gaze shifted to Naruto, his expression turning contemplative. The dimensional anomaly. Yes, you may prove just as useful. He raised his Zanpakuto. Shatter. Crystallino. His release triggered a cascade of transformations among his followers, their combined spiritual pressure creating a whirlwind of sand around them. When it cleared, Valeron stood transformed. His body now covered in a crystalline exoskeleton that refracted the moonlight in dazzling patterns, while his right arm had extended into a long, jagged blade. Take them, he commanded. The battle erupted across the ridge, Arrancar clashing with blinding speed and power. Herribel's Fracken released their Zanpakuto simultaneously, their combined forms creating a momentary advantage that allowed them to drive back the initial wave of attackers. Naruto created a dozen shadow clones to even the odds, using the confusion to approach Valeron directly. The crystalline Arrancar moved with surprising speed despite his transformed state, his blade arm leaving trails of light as it sliced through two clones. Your tricks won't save you, outsider, Valeron taunted. My Crystallino doesn't just cut. It absorbs spiritual energy from whatever it touches. Your clones are just feeding my power. To demonstrate, he swept his blade through another clone and visibly grew stronger, the crystals on his body glowing brighter. Good to know, Naruto replied, forming a Rasengan in his palm. Then I'll just have to hit you with something you can't absorb. He charged forward, feinting left before ducking. Under Valeron's swing and driving the Rasengan toward his chest. The spiraling sphere collided with the crystal armor, creating a high-pitched screech as it ground against the seemingly impenetrable surface. For a moment, they were locked in a stalemate. Then the Rasengan began to crack the crystalline exterior, fissures spreading across Valeron's chest plate. The Arrancar's eyes widened in shock just before the Rasengan broke through, sending him flying backward into a dune. Naruto didn't have time to press his advantage, as three more of Valeron's followers converged on him. He dodged a barrage of Sero blasts, using his clones to create openings for counterattacks. Nearby, Herribel faced Valeron's lieutenant, a female Arrancar whose released form allowed her to manipulate sand itself. The desert around Herribel rose in waves and spikes, trying to entrap or impale her. Herribel responded with precise blasts of water pressure from her Zanpakuto, turning the sand to mud and neutralizing its effectiveness. Across the battlefield, Apache, Mila Rose, and Sung Sun fought back-to-back, their complementary abilities creating a formidable defense. Yet even with their coordination and Naruto's clones, they were gradually being pushed back toward the edge of the crater. They're hurting us, Sung Sun called out, deflecting an attack with her serpentine arm. Trying to force us down into the ritual site. Herribel realized the truth of this assessment just as Valeron, recovered from Naruto's attack, rejoined the battle with renewed fury. His crystal armor was cracked but still functional, and now it pulsed with accumulated energy. You cannot stop what is already in motion, he declared, firing a Sero of unprecedented power toward Herribel. She blocked it with her Zanpakuto, but the force pushed her back several yards, dangerously close to the crater's edge. Before she could regain her footing, the sand beneath her collapsed, not naturally, but guided by the sand manipulating Arrancar. Herribel began to fall, quickly adjusting to use Sonito to reach stable ground. But as she moved, a tear in reality opened directly in her path, one of the dimensional distortions from the ritual below. Expanded outward with deliberate timing. Herribel, Naruto shouted, breaking away from his own fight to dive toward her. He created a chain of clones, forming a living rope that extended down into the tear after her. The last clone caught her wrist just as she was about to disappear into the distortion. For a moment, it seemed they might pull her back, then Valeron appeared behind the chain of clones. His crystal blade gleaming. Your interference ends now, he hissed, slicing through the clone chain. Naruto lunged forward, desperation giving him speed, but it was too late. The dimensional tear swallowed Herribel, closing behind her with a sound like breaking glass. No, Apache screamed, her distraction costing her as an enemy blade slipped past her guard, opening a deep gash across her shoulder. Valeron laughed, turning to face Naruto with triumphant malice. Don't worry, she isn't dead. My master needs her alive for the convergence. As for you, he raised his blade, your energy will serve just as well to complete today's work. Rage and determination surged through Naruto. Golden chakra erupted around him as he tapped into Kurama's power, his features becoming more feral, eyes shifting to crimson slits. You're going to tell me exactly what your master did with Herribel, he growled, his voice overlaid with the Nine Tails' deeper tones. And then you're going to help me get her back. Valeron's confident expression faltered slightly at the transformation. What are you? Something your crystal toy can't handle, Naruto replied, vanishing from sight with raw speed. He reappeared behind Valeron, a chakra-enhanced fist already in motion. The impact shattered the crystal armor across Valeron's back, sending him sprawling. Before the Arankar could recover, Naruto was on him again. Golden chakra arms extending from his body to grab Valeron's limbs and pin him to the ground. Last chance, Naruto warned, a Rasengan forming in his hand, this one larger, infused. Ed with Kurama's chakra and pulsing with barely contained power. Where is Herribel? Valeron's eyes darted past Naruto, widening at something behind him. It doesn't matter now. The convergence has begun. Naruto sensed the massive surge of spiritual pressure too late. From the ritual site below, a pillar of energy erupted skyward, engulfing the battlefield. The masked figure at the center of the ritual had raised its arms. And the tears in reality were expanding rapidly, merging into a single, massive distortion. Naruto. Mila Rose shouted over the roar of collapsing dimensions. We need to retreat. He glanced back to see Herribel's Fracken supporting each other, all three wounded but still fighting. Around them, Valeron's followers were disengaging, using Sonito to put distance bedway. End themselves and the growing dimensional rift. Naruto tightened his grip on Valeron. This isn't over, he promised, before knocking the Arankar unconscious with a precise strike. He slung the limp form over his shoulder and created a dozen more shadow clones to cover their retreat. As they fled the expanding distortion, Naruto looked back one last time at the ritual site. The masked figure had turned to track their escape, and though it had no visible eyes, Naruto felt its attention fix on him specifically. A voice, not spoken aloud but projected directly into his mind, reached him across the distance. The Queen of Hollow Seas will serve as the cornerstone. The Fox of Six Paths will be the catalyst. The boundaries between worlds will fall, and all shall return to the primordial chaos from which creation first emerged. We will meet again, Naruto Uzumaki. Sooner than you think. The voice faded as they put distance between themselves and the ritual site, but its words left a cold certainty in Naruto's gut. This was only the beginning of something much larger, and Herribel was now at the center of it. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Trials of the Fox King. The return to Las Noches felt like a retreat. Naruto carried Valeron's unconscious form across his shoulders, the weight of the Arankar nothing compared to the burden of failure that pressed down on all of them. Herribel's Fracken moved with mechanical precision, their wounds leaving trails of blood across the white sands of Hueco Mundo. No one spoke. What was there to say? Their leader, the one stabilizing force in the chaos of post-Aizen Hueco Mundo, had been swallowed by a dimensional tear, taken by an enemy they barely understood for purposes they could only guess at. The fortress loomed ahead, its massive white walls gleaming under the perpetual crescent moon. As they approached the eastern gate, figures emerged to meet them, Lucian at the front, his expression shifting from relief to alarm as he registered their wounds and Herribel's absence. What happened? He asked, directing several lower-ranked Arankar to help with the wounded. Ambush, Apache spat, shrugging off an offered hand despite the deep gash across her shoulder. Valeron was working with something. Not Hollow, not Shinigami. They took Herribel, Sung Sun added, her usual composure cracking slightly. Some kind of dimensional trap. Lucian's face drained of what little color it had. Inside, quickly, we must secure the fortress. He glanced at Valeron's unconscious form. And put him somewhere he can't escape when he wakes. The halls of Las Noches buzzed with tension as word spread of Herribel's capture. By the time they reached the central chamber, a crowd had gathered, concerned followers, opportunists sensing weakness, and those simply seeking information. The noise hit them like a physical wall, dozens of conversations overlapping in a symphony of anxiety and ambition. Naruto deposited Valeron none too gently on the floor before the throne, the action silencing the room. The crystal armor that had covered the Arankar had mostly receded following his defeat, leaving him looking far less imposing than he had on the battlefield. Valeron betrayed Las Noches, Naruto announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. He's working with some entity beyond our world, something trying to break down the walls between dimensions. Murmurs erupted across the chamber, some of disbelief, others of vindication. A tall, skeletal Arankar with a fragment of mask covering his left eye stepped forward. And where is Herribel-sama? Why are you speaking in her place, outsider? Mila Rose bristled. Watch your tone, Lezero. Herribel-sama was captured while fighting to protect this realm, a fight from which some were conspicuously absent. Captured, Lezero echoed, turning to address the crowd. Our so-called leader, taken by the enemy, and were expected to believe this stranger who appeared from nowhere just before the troubles began. The mood in the room darkened, factions forming visibly as Arankar moved to stand with those who shared their suspicions. Naruto sensed the precipice upon which they balanced. One wrong move and Las Noches would dissolve into civil war. Enough. Lucian's voice cracked like a whip. This bickering serves no one but our enemies. Valeron will be interrogated. Until then, we follow the protocols Herribel-sama established in the event of her absence. Which are? Asked another Arankar, this one a woman with feather-like protrusions from her shoulders. Leadership falls to her Fracken collectively, Lucian stated, with counsel from the 5 senior Arankar she appointed. Lezero scoffed. Her Fracken. 3 wounded followers who couldn't even protect their master. You dare? Apache began, taking a threatening step forward despite her injuries. Stop. Naruto's command was quiet but carried an unmistakable authority. He stepped between them, golden chakra flickering briefly around his form. This is exactly what they want. Las Noches tearing itself apart from within while they prepare their next move. And what would you know of our affairs? Lezero challenged, though he had taken an instinctive step back from Naruto's flaring chakra. I know enough to recognize a divide-and-conquer strategy when I see one, Naruto replied. Valeron didn't just happen to betray you. He was positioned as an asset, waiting for the right moment to strike. His master, whoever or whatever that is, wants control of Las Noches and Hueco Mundo. He turned slowly, Medan. The eyes of various faction leaders throughout the room. You can fight among yourselves for scraps of power that won't matter when dimensional walls collapse, or you can work together to get Herribel back and stop whatever's coming. A heavy silence fell over the assembly. Lucian seized the moment. Search Valeron's quarters, he ordered a group of loyal Arankar. Find anything that might who he's working with or where they might have taken Herribel-sama. He turned to Herribel's Fracken. You 3, get your wounds treated, then report everything that happened. Every detail could matter. As the crowd dispersed with a new sense of purpose, Naruto found himself standing alone before Herribel's empty throne. The weight of dozens of calculating gazes pressed on him from all sides, some speculative, others hostile. A few almost hopeful. Lucian approached, speaking low enough that only Naruto could hear. That was well handled, but this fragile unity won't last without direction, or results. Naruto nodded grimly. Then let's get some answers. Valeron's interrogation yielded less than they'd hoped. Awakening in a cell specially designed to contain Arankar, he had them with contemptuous laughter rather than information. You understand nothing of what's coming, he said, lounging against the wall as if he were a guest rather than a prisoner. The age of isolated dimensions is ending. My master sees the truth that Aizen only glimpsed. Reality itself is flawed, fragmented when it should be whole. Who is your master? Naruto demanded, standing just beyond the energy barrier that contained the Arankar. Valeron smiled, the expression never reaching his cold eyes. He has many names across many worlds. In the oldest texts of Soul Society, he was called Mordecai. a fragment of the Soul King that gained independence. Lucian, standing beside Naruto, inhaled sharply. Impossible. The Soul King's fragments are closely guarded by the Royal Guard. The known fragments, yes, Valeron conceded. But the Soul King was sundered before recorded history began. Some pieces were overlooked, left to develop consciousness of their own. And Herribel, Mila Rose pressed, barely containing her anger. What does this Mordecai want with her? The Queen of Hollow Seas has an unusually stable spiritual signature, Valeron explained, using Mordecai's title for Herribel with mocking formality. Perfect for anchoring a dimensional convergence point. Her energy will serve as the foundation upon which the Great Reunion will be built. Reunion of what? Naruto asked, though he already suspected the answer. Everything, Valeron replied, his eyes gleaming with fanatical light. All dimensions restored to their original, unified state. No more artificial barriers. No more fragmented existence. That would destroy all the realms, Lucian protested. Hueco Mundo, Soul Society, the world of the living, they exist separately for a reason. Valeron shrugged. Destruction, creation, merely perspectives on the same process. From chaos comes new order. And I'm guessing you think you'll have a nice position in this new order, Naruto observed, his tone hardening. Let me tell you something about power-hungry manipulators, Valeron. I've dealt with plenty of them, and they all have one thing in common. They lie to their followers just as easily as they lie to their enemies. Something flickered across Valeron's face, a momentary doubt quickly suppressed. Mordecai has shared power beyond your imagination. When the convergence is complete, you'll be discarded, Naruto cut in. Just like Aizen discarded Herribel when she was no longer useful. You're a tool, nothing more. Valeron stood suddenly, his spiritual pressure flaring against the containment barrier. You know nothing of my arrangement with. He stopped abruptly, eyes widening as if hearing something they could not. His expression shifted to one of surprised pain. Without warning, cracks appeared across his skin. Light spilling from within. He comes, Valeron whispered, a mixture of awe and terror in his voice. The first phase is complete. The Hollow Queen's energy flows through the conduit. Before anyone could respond, Valeron's body began to disintegrate, not into the usual spiritual particles of a dying Urankar, but into crystalline shards that dissolved into light. In seconds, nothing remained but a fine dust that settled on the cell floor. What the hell just happened? Apache demanded, staring at the empty space where their prisoner had been. His master cut the connection, Lucian surmised grimly. Valeron had served his purpose. Naruto's fists clenched at his sides. Or he was about to reveal something Mordecai didn't want us to know. He turned to the others. We need to find out everything we can about this Soul King fragment and dimensional convergence. And we need to prepare Las Noches for whatever comes next. Prepare how? Sung Sun asked. We don't even know what we're facing. Then we start with what we do know, Naruto replied. Valeron had followers here. Find them. Some may genuinely believe in this Great Reunion nonsense, but others were probably just opportunists. Offer amnesty to anyone willing to share information. Lucian nodded approvingly. I'll coordinate the investigation. We also need to strengthen Las Noches' defenses, Naruto continued. If Mordecai wants this place, there's a reason beyond simple territory. What makes Las Noches strategically valuable? Its position, Mila Rose realized. Las Noches sits at the geometric center of Hueco Mundo's spiritual pressure currents. It's why Aizen chose it as his base. The fortress amplifies and channels spiritual energy. Like the ritual site we saw, Naruto mused. Air creating focal points for whatever this convergence process involves. Which means they'll come for Las Noches eventually, Lucian concluded. Then we make sure we're ready when they do, Naruto declared. And while we're preparing here, we need a team to investigate these dimensional disturbances. If they're growing, we need to know where and how quickly. The discussion continued late int. Oh, what passed for night in the artificial daylight beneath Las Noches' dome. Plans were made, responsibilities assigned, and a tentative leadership structure established with Herribel's Fracken at its head and Naruto serving as tactical advisor. Yet as the others departed to begin their tasks, Lucian lingered, studying Naruto with an unreadable expression. You did not seek authority, yet you've assumed it naturally, he observed. Interesting for one so new to our realm. Naruto shrugged. Where I come from, I was being trained to lead my village someday. I guess some habits stick. Indeed, Lucian seemed to come to some decision. There is something you should see, something Herribel-sama was investigating before your arrival. It may be relevant to our current situation. Curious, Naruto followed the lanky Arankar through a series of corridors he hadn't explored before, descending deeper into the fortress. They eventually reached a heavily secured door that Lucian opened with a complex sequence of spiritual pressure pulses. The chamber beyond held what appeared to be a library, shelves of ancient texts and scrolls lining the walls, with a large table at the center covered in open books and diagrams. Aizen's private research collection, Lucian explained. Herribel-sama discovered it after his defeat. Most of it concerns the Hogyoku, an artificial Arankar creation, but she found materials on something else. He led Naruto to the table and indicated a particularly ancient scroll, its edges crumbling despite careful preservation. The text was in a language Naruto didn't recognize. But the diagrams were clear enough. Concentric circles connected by lines of force, with symbols at key intersections that resembled the ones they'd seen on the ritual pillars. The Convergence Protocol, Lucian translated. Theoretical research into the original separation of dimensions and how they might be rejoined. Aizen considered it but abandoned the idea as too unstable even for his purposes. But Mordecai thinks he can make it work, Naruto surmised, studying the diagrams more closely. One section caught his attention, a figure at the center of the concentric circles, serving as an anchor point for the surrounding energies, using Herribel as a stabilizer. Yes, though the text warns that a single anchor point would be insufficient for complete dimensional convergence, Lucian continued. It would require multiple anchors, specifically individuals with unique spiritual resonance patterns. Naruto remembered Mordecai's words, delivered directly to his mind. The battlefield. The Queen of Hollow Seas will serve as the cornerstone. The Fox of Six Paths will be the catalyst. He wants me too, Naruto realized. Something about the nine tails are my chakra signature. It would explain the timing of your arrival, Lucian agreed. The question is whether you were brought here intentionally or simply detected once you arrived. Naruto frowned, piecing together the fragments of information. Either way, we have an advantage Mordecai might not expect. If he needs specific individuals as anchor points, then the convergence can't proceed to completion without all of them. Which buys us time to locate Herribel-sama and disrupt whatever process has already begun, Lucian concluded with a nod of approval. Exactly. Naruto looked up from the diagrams with renewed determination. We need to track these dimensional disturbances to their source. If we find them, we find Herribel. Over the next several days, Las Noches transformed under Naruto's guidance. The fortress's defenses were strengthened, patrols established, and communication systems improved. Valeron's remaining followers were identified and monitored, with several coming forward voluntarily after their leader's disturbing end. Naruto worked closely with Herribel's Fracken, whose initial skepticism gradually gave way to grudging respect as they recognized his commitment to finding their mistress. His shadow clones proved invaluable, allowing him to be in multiple places simultaneously, training with troops in one area while attending strategy sessions in another. His fighting style, so different from the Arankar's Sero-based attacks and sword techniques, became a subject of fascination. Soon, he found himself instructing some of the younger Arankar in basic chakra control principles, adapting the techniques to work with their spiritual pressure. It's not exactly the same, he explained during one such session, guiding a female Arankar with short black hair through a chakra-focusing exercise. But the principle is similar, directing energy through specific pathways to achieve controlled effects. Like this, she asked, concentrating until a small, stable bee of spiritual pressure formed above her palm, not the wild energy of a standard Sero, but something more contained. Exactly like that, Naruto confirmed with an encouraging smile. The more precisely you can control your spiritual pressure, the more versatile it becomes in battle. From across the training ground, Apache watched with arms crossed. He's good with them, she reluctantly admitted to Mila Rose, who stood beside her. They respond to him. Because he doesn't rely on fear or intimidation, Mila Rose observed. Like Herribel-sama, he's not her, Apache snapped, though without her usual heat. No, Mila Rose agreed. But until we get her back, he might be what Las Noches needs. The conversation ended abruptly as Lucian approached with urgent news. The scouts they had sent to investigate the dimensional disturbances had returned. Not all of them, but enough to report disturbing developments across Hueco Mundo. The meeting that followed included only the core leadership group, Naruto, Herribel's Fracken, Lucian, and 2 other senior Arankar who had proven their loyalty. The scout, a wiry Arankar with a mask fragment covering his left ear, stood before them, exhaustion evident in his posture. The disturbances are spreading, he reported. We identified 7 active sites across Hueco Mundo where the dimensional fabric has been deliberately weakened. Each features the same basic configuration, ritual pillars arranged in a circle, with modified hollows guarding the perimeter. 7, Sung Sun murmured. A spiritually significant number in both Soul Society and Hueco Mundo traditions. What about Herribel? Apache demanded. Any sign of her? The scout shook his head. No direct confirmation, but at the largest site, approximately 200 miles northeast of Las Noches, we detected a spiritual pressure signature that matches her resonance pattern. It's being used somehow, channeled through the central pillar. That's our target then, Naruto decided, studying the rough map the scout had drawn. We need a focused team, small enough to avoid detection but strong enough to handle whatever guards they have. The area is heavily patrolled, the scout warned. And not just by hollows. We saw other beings, some that resembled Arankar but felt wrong. And others that didn't belong to any classification we recognize. Beings from other dimensions, Lucian theorized. If the barriers are thinning, entities from neighboring realms might be crossing over, either willingly or accidentally. Naruto thought of his own arrival, the violent, disorienting passage through the dimensional tier. Some might be just as confused and stranded as I was. Not everyone crossing dimensions is necessarily working with Mordecai. You suggest we might find allies among these interlopers? Mila Rose asked skeptically. It's worth investigating, Naruto confirmed. At the very least, they might have information about what's happening in their home dimensions. He planning continued late into the night, preparations made for an expedition to the northeastern site. Naruto would lead, accompanied by Apache, Mila Rose, and a small contingent of their most trusted fighters. Sung Sun would remain at Las Noches with Lucian, maintaining stability and continuing the research into the convergence protocol. As the meeting concluded, Naruto found himself alone on one of Las Noches' many balconies. Gazing out over the endless desert of Hueco Mundo, the perpetual night sky with its crescent moon had become almost familiar over the past weeks, a constant in a situation defined by uncertainty. He sensed Apache's approach before he heard her spiritual pressure as distinctive as a fingerprint to his enhanced senses. Can't sleep? He asked without turning. Arankar don't need much sleep, she replied, moving to stand beside him at the balcony's edge. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then, why are you doing all this? Naruto glanced at her. What do you mean? You're not from our world. You owe us nothing. You could be focusing on finding your own way home instead of helping us rescue Herribel-sama and defend Las Noches. It was a fair question. One Naruto had asked himself more than once over the past days. At first, I thought maybe helping you would help me find a way back, he admitted. But now, I'm not sure it's that simple. Meaning, Naruto turned to face the desert again, gathering his thoughts. Where I come from, I've spent my life fighting to protect people. My friends, my village, eventually the whole world. It's who I am. I can't just walk away when I see others in danger, especially from someone trying to tear reality apart for their own purposes. Apache studied him, her mismatched eyes searching for deception and finding none. And Herribel-sama, you barely know her. A faint smile crossed Naruto's face. True, but in the short time I did know her, I saw someone trying to build something worthwhile in a harsh world. Someone protecting others not because she had to, but because she chose to. He shrugged. That's worth fighting for, no matter what dimension you're from. Something in Apache's expression softened marginally. She has that effect on people. The ability to inspire loyalty without demanding it. Like you three, Naruto observed. Her Fracken. We would die for her without hesitation, Apache confirmed. No bravado in her voice, just simple fact. She gave us identity, purpose, when we were lost in the endless cycle of hollow evolution. She showed us there could be more to existence than just consuming or being consumed. Naruto nodded, understanding better than she might realize. In my world, I grew up alone, feared and hated because of the 9 tails sealed inside me. But I found people who saw past that, who gave me a chance to be more than what everyone expected. That's why I fight, to protect that kind of bond wherever I find it. A comfortable silence fell between them, and you. Understanding reached without further words. When Apache finally spoke again, her voice held a new note of resolve. We leave at first light, then. To find Herribel-sama, and to stop Mordecai, Naruto added. Before he tears apart more than just Hueco Mundo. The expedition departed Las Noches as planned, traveling under the cover of specialized cloaking techniques developed by combining Naruto's transformation jutsu with the Arrancar's ability to suppress spiritual pressure. Their group consisted of 8 members, Naruto, Apache, Mila Rose, and 5 elite Arrancar selected for both their combat abilities and their unquestionable loyalty to Herribel. They moved swiftly across the desert, avoiding known patrol routes and detection posts that the scouts had identified. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled northeast, the endless white dunes giving way to crystalline formations that grew more elaborate and numerous the further they ventured. The spiritual pressure is denser here, Mila Rose observed as they paused atop a large crystal outcropping to survey the terrain ahead. It's affecting the natural formation of the crystallized reishi. Naruto nodded, feeling the difference through his sage mode senses. It's like the energy is being drawn towards something, concentrated rather than dispersed. We're getting close to the convergence site, one of the Arrancar scouts confirmed, consulting a crude map. Another 20 miles, based on the last report. They continued onward with heightened caution, moving from crystal to avoid leaving tracks in the sand. As they drew closer to their destination, the very air began to feel strange, heavier in some places, unnaturally thin in others, as if the basic physical laws were becoming unstable. What's that? Apache suddenly asked, pointing to a distortion in the air ahead of them. A wavering, like heat rising from sun-baked stone, except that Hueco Mundo had no sun. Naruto enhanced his vision with chakra, focusing on the disturbance. It's a thin spot, like the dimensional tear that brought me here, but smaller, not fully open. As they watched, the distortion pulsed, expanding briefly before contracting again. In that moment of expansion, they all glimpsed another landscape beyond, not the white desert of Hueco Mundo, but a lush forest with impossibly tall trees. That's not the world of the living or soul society, Mila Rose said with certainty. No, Naruto agreed, a strange recognition stirring within him. It looks like the forest of death from my world. Before anyone could respond, the distortion pulsed again, more violently this time. A figure tumbled through, hitting the sand hard and rolling to a stop several yards from their position. The tear sealed behind them, shrinking back to its previous wavering state. Naruto signaled for the others to stay back as he approached the newcomer cautiously. The figure, humanoid but clearly not human, groaned and pushed itself to a sitting position, revealing greenish-blue scales covering its face and hands. Yellow, slit-pupilled eyes blinked in confusion at the white desert surroundings. Where? The being rasped, its voice carrying a reptilian hiss. Hueco Mundo, Naruto answered, stopping a safe distance away. You just fell through a dimensional tear. The scaled being turned toward his voice, shock registering on its inhuman features. You speak the common tongue. In this strange realm, I'm not from here either, Naruto explained, relaxing slightly as he sensed no immediate hostility from the newcomer. Name's Naruto Uzumaki. I was pulled through a similar tear weeks ago. The being struggled to its feet. His feet, Naruto decided, based on the masculine timbre of the voice. He stood slightly shorter than Naruto. His clothing a combination of leather and woven fabric that suggested a civilization with moderate technological development. Sazar of the Viridian Clutch, he introduced himself with a formal inclination of his head. I was tracking strange energy fluctuations in our territory when the very air tore open and pulled me through. Apache and Mila Rose had approached cautiously, their hands near their Zanpakuto. Sazar's eyes widened at the sight of them. More Outworlders, or natives to this desert realm. We belong to Hueco Mundo, Mila Rose confirmed. Though we've never seen your kind before. Nor I yours, Sazar acknowledged. He turned back to Naruto. You say you arrived in the same manner. Have you found no way to return to your home dimension? Not yet, Naruto admitted. T were investigating the cause of these dimensional disturbances. Someone, or something, is deliberately weakening the barriers between worlds. Sazar's scaled features contorted in alarm. The same occurs in my realm. The elders believed it natural phenomena, but I discovered evidence of artificial manipulation. That's what I was investigating when I was pulled through. Naruto exchanged meaningful glances with Apache and Mila Rose. Sounds like Mordecai's influence extends beyond just Hueco Mundo. Mordecai, Sazar repeated, the name clearly unfamiliar to him. A fragment of something called the Soul King, Naruto explained. He's trying to collapse the boundaries between dimensions, merge everything back into a single reality. The ancient convergence, Sazar whispered, his yellow eyes widening further. It's not just legend, then. The scrolls of Vathra speak of a time before separation, when all existences were one. And of the sundering that created the distinct realms. You know about this? Apache demanded, suddenly much more interested in the scaled visitor. Only through ancient texts preserved by my clutch for generations, Sazar clarified. The scrolls warn of catastrophe that would follow any attempt to reverse the sundering, the annihilation of all distinct life as the incompatible spiritual laws of different dimensions clash and override each other. That's not great news, Naruto observed grimly. No, Sazar agreed. If someone is truly attempting to force convergence, they risk not unification but mutual destruction of all involved realms. Their conversation was interrupted by a low, rumbling sound from the direction they had been heading. All eyes turned toward the horizon, where a column of blue-white energy had suddenly erupted skyward. That's the convergence site, one of the Arankar scouts realized. They're accelerating the process, Mila Rose concluded grimly. We need to move now. Naruto turned to Sazar. You can come with us or stay here. But staying might not be safe. This whole area is becoming unstable. The scaled being didn't hesitate. I will accompany you. If the ancient convergence is being attempted, my knowledge may prove useful. And I have as much interest in stopping it as you do. My world is at stake as well. With their unexpected ally added to their group, they increased their pace toward the convergence site. The column of energy growing larger as they approached. Naruto sent shadow clones ahead as scouts, wanting more information before they committed to a direct approach. The first clones. Memories returned to him after about 15 minutes, images of a massive installation constructed around a natural basin in the desert floor. Unlike the relatively simple ritual site they had witnessed before, this was an elaborate complex with multiple levels descending into the earth, all centered around a cluster of the familiar obsidian pillars. Hundreds of hollows and other beings moved purposefully throughout the structure, performing tasks that seemed part of a larger, coordinated effort. It's like a fortress, Naruto reported to the others as they concealed themselves behind a large crystal formation. Much bigger than what we saw before, and heavily guarded. Not just with hollows, but with those hybrid Arankar and beings I don't recognize. Did you see Herribel-sama? Apache asked immediately. Naruto shook his head. Not on the surface, but there's a central chamber below ground where the energy column originates. If she's here, that's where they'd be keeping her. And Mordecai? Mila Rose inquired. Any sign of him? No, but there's someone, or something, directing operations. A tall figure in white robes with a mask. Not the same one we saw before, but similar. The masked hierarchs, Sazar interjected. His voice hushed with recognition. The scrolls mention them as servants of the Primal One, entities created to maintain the boundaries after the sundering, who eventually rebelled against their purpose. Great, Apache muttered. Ancient dimensional police gone rogue. If they were created to maintain boundaries, they'd understand exactly how to break them down, Naruto realized. We need to get closer, figure out what stage the convergence process is at. They spent the next hour carefully circulating shadow clones around the perimeter of the installation, mapping guard positions and observing patrol patterns. The complexity of the operation became increasingly clear. This was no hastily established outpost but a carefully designed facility, likely in place for months or even years before becoming active. There, Naruto finally said, indicating a section of the outer perimeter where the guard presence was thinnest. My clones identified a main tenant's access tunnel with minimal security. We can enter there and work our way toward the central chamber. The infiltration began smoothly enough. Using a combination of Naruto's transformation techniques to alter their appearance and the Arrancar's ability to modulate their spiritual pressure, they slipped past the outer guards disguised as maintenance workers. The tunnel led them into a network of corridors humming with strange energy that made the hair on Naruto's arms stand on end. The dimensional barriers are paper-thin here, Sazar observed, his scaled skin taking on an almost translucent quality in the artificial light. I can feel my home realm, so close, yet unreachable. Stay focused, Naruto cautioned. We need to find Herribel and disrupt whatever process they've started. They moved deeper into the facility, the ambient noise growing louder, a combination of machinery, the low conversations of workers, and a persistent hum that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Twice they were forced to duck into side corridors to avoid patrol groups, and once Naruto used a subtle genjutsu to convince a suspicious guard they belonged there. Finally, they reached a vantage point overlooking the central chamber, a vast, dome-shaped space with the obsidian pillars arranged in a perfect circle at its center. Energy coursed between the pillars, forming a web of light that converged on a floating crystal suspended in the middle of the circle. And contained within that crystal, Herribel-sama, Apache gasped, barely managing to keep her voice down. It was indeed Herribel, suspended in the transparent crystal, her eyes closed as if in deep sleep. Cables and conduits connected the crystal to the pillars, channeling her spiritual energy through the entire system. The loom of blue-white light they had seen from outside erupted from directly above her, shooting upward through an opening in the chamber's ceiling. Around the circle moved white-robed figures with smooth, featureless masks, the hierarchs Sazar had mentioned. They performed precise adjustments to the equipment, consulting holographic displays that flickered with constantly changing symbols. They're using her as a power source. Mila Rose growled, her hand tightening on her Zanpakuto, draining her energy to fuel the convergence. Not just a power source, Sazar corrected grimly. An anchor point. Her spiritual signature is being used as a dimensional coordinate, a fixed reference to align the converging realms. Can we free her? One of the Arrancar scouts asked. Naruto studied the setup, his tactical mind processing the possibilities. Not directly. The system looks designed to trigger some kind of catastrophic reaction if tampered with. We need to disrupt the power flow first, then extract her from the crystal. The conduits, Sazar suggested, pointing to thick cables running from a series of generators along the chamber's perimeter. If we could overload them simultaneously. Naruto nodded. My shadow clones can plant explosive tags at key junctions. The simultaneous detonation should create enough confusion for us to reach Herribel. They split into teams, each assigned a specific task in the plan. Naruto created 24 shadow clones, transforming them to resemble the facility's workers before sending them to place the explosive tags. Apache and Mila Rose would lead the charge to reach Herribel once the disruption began, while Sazar and the other Arrancar would secure their escape route. As the last pieces fell into place, Naruto felt a familiar prickle at the back of his neck, the sensation of being watched. He glanced around casually, trying to locate the source without being obvious. There, a small, bat-like creature perched in the shadows of a high support beam. Its eyes glowing faintly as it observed them. Too late. The creature's eyes flashed red, and an alarm immediately blared throughout the facility. Lights shifted from white to pulsing crimson, and voices shouted orders from all directions. We've been compromised, Naruto announced, dropping all pretense of stealth. Plan B. Hit them hard and fast. His shadow clones detonated their explosive tags without waiting for further coordination. The resulting chaos was immediate. Power surges racing through the system, secondary explosions as overloaded equipment failed catastrophically, disoriented workers and guards running in all directions. The hierarchs at the central circle responded with surprising calm, forming a defensive perimeter around Herribel's crystal while initiating some kind of emergency protocol. One raised a hand, and a shimmering barrier sprang into existence around the entire ritual area. "We need to break that barrier," Naruto shouted to the others as the Y fought their way through the confusion toward the central chamber. "Apache, Mila Rose, can you hit it with everything you've got?" Both Frakken nodded grimly, drawing their Zanpakuto. Thrust, Sierva, Devour, Leona. Their released forms surged with power, Apache transforming to incorporate deer-like elements, while Mila Rose took on lioness attributes. Together with the other Arankar in their group, they launched a coordinated barrage of Sero blasts against the barrier, their combined spiritual pressure making the very air vibrate. The barrier flickered but held. Behind it, the hierarchs continued their work with the ritual, apparently accelerating the process in response to the attack. The column of energy above Herribel intensified, and her suspended form seemed to twitch in pain even in her unconscious state. "It's not working," Apache snarled in frustration, launching another Sero that dissipated against the barrier. Naruto assessed the situation rapidly. The barriers anchored to those nodes, he realized, pointing to crystalline structures at 6 equidistant points around the perimeter. "We need to take them out simultaneously." He created 6 shadow clones, each foreman Ga Recentrican infused with wind chakra. The clones took position opposite each node, waiting for his signal. At his command, they launched their attacks simultaneously, the screeching, shuriken Sha. Head energy constructs spinning through the air before impacting the barrier nodes with devastating precision. For a moment, nothing happened. Then cracks appeared in the barrier, spreading rapidly as He nodes, synchronized frequencies collapsed. With a sound like shattering glass, the entire protective field failed, leaving the ritual circle and its attendants exposed. "Now," Naruto shouted, charging forward with the 9 tails chakra cloak forming around him. The golden energy took shape, extending chakra arms that reached toward Herribel's crystal prison. The hierarchs moved to intercept, air smooth masks betraying no emotion as they raised their hands in unison. The air distorted around them, and Naruto felt his chakra being somehow dampened, not suppressed entirely, but muffled, as if passing through some kind of dimensional filter. "They're manipulating the spiritual laws in their immediate vicinity," Sazar called out, having observed the effect. "Imposing the rules of a different dimension to neutralize our abilities." Indeed, Naruto found his chakra responding sluggishly, while Apache and Mila Rose's Seros seemed to lose coherence before reaching their targets. The hierarchs advanced methodically, drawing slender white wands that extended into energy staves crackling with power. Naruto adapted quickly, shifting to taijutsu to close the distance. The first hierarch he reached swung its staff with inhuman precision, but Naruto's battle instincts allowed him to duck under the attack and deliver a solid kick to the being's midsection. It staggered back, apparently surprised by the effectiveness of simple physical combat. Their neutralizing energy-based attacks, Naruto called to the others. "Go physical." The Arankar adjusted their strategy, relying less on arrows and more on direct Zanpakuto strikes and hand-to-hand combat. Even with this adaptation, the hierarchs proved formidable opponents. Their movements were fluid and coordinated, as if they shared a single consciousness. Slowly, however, they began to gain ground. Apache and Mila Rose fought with the desperate ferocity of those protecting their master, while Sazar revealed unexpected combat abilities. Using natural toxins secreted from his scaled skin to momentarily paralyze one of the hierarchs. Naruto battled his way toward the crystal containing Herribel, dodging energy staff strikes and countering with precisely timed blows. As he drew closer, he felt the system's energy intensifying. Whatever process they had initiated was approaching a critical stage. Finally breaking past the last defender, Naruto reached the base of the crystal. Up close, he could see Herribel's face clearly, her expression tight with pain even in unconsciousness. The cables connected to the crystal pulsed with her spiritual energy, feeding it into the convergence mechanism. "Hang on, Herribel," he murmured, placing his hands on the crystal's surface. He could feel her spiritual pressure responding to his chakra, resonating in an unexpected harmony. Drawing on Kurama's power, he channeled it directly into the crystal, seeking to disrupt the extraction process without harming Herribel. The crystal began to vibrate, hairline fractures appearing across its surface as the conflicting energies fought for dominance. Naruto intensified his efforts, golden chakra flooding the system and overriding the carefully calibrated frequencies. With a high-pitched whine that rapidly ascended beyond audible range, the crystal shattered. Naruto caught Herribel's limp form as she fell forward, cradling her against his chest as the convergence apparatus around them began to fail catastrophically. The obsidian pillars cracked, releasing wild surges of uncontrolled energy that lashed out in all directions. "We need to leave, now," Sazar shouted over the growing chaos. "The dimensional instability is cascading." Naruto lifted Herribel securely in his arms and turned to find their escape route. The chamber had become a maelstrom of collapsing equipment and dimensional fractures, small tears opening randomly throughout the space, offering glimpses of other realms before sealing shut again. They fought their way back toward the maintenance tunnel, Apache and Mila Rose clearing a path through the panicking workers and guards. The entire facility seemed to be coming apart at the seams, support structures grow aining as spatial distortions placed impossible stresses on them. "This way," one of their Arankar scouts called, identifying a clear path through the destruction. They had almost reached the exit. A massive tear opened directly in their path, a swirling vortex of dimensional energy that blocked their escape route. From within the vortex emerged a figure Naruto recognized immediately, the masked entity from the first ritual site. Now flanked by two hierarchs. The Fox of Six Paths, the figure intoned, its voice reverberating as if coming from multiple sources simultaneously. "You continue to interfere with the inevitable. If you mean stopping you from destroying multiple dimensions, then yeah, that's me," Naruto replied, shifting Herribel slightly in his arms to free one hand if needed. "And I'm guessing you're Mordecai." The figure tilted its head in an unnervingly inhuman manner. "That name is but one of many I have worn across the fractured realms. Soon, such distinctions will be meaningless. All identities will merge in the Great Convergence." "Not happening," Naruto stated flatly. "We've disabled your anchor point and disrupted the ritual. Whatever you were planning is finished." A sound emerged from behind the smooth mask, something that might have been laughter, though it held no mirth. "You understand so little. The Queen of Hollow Seas has already served her primary purpose, establishing the initial resonance pattern. Her energy signature has been recorded and can be replicated. The first phase of convergence proceeds exactly as designed." Naruto felt Herribel stir slightly in his arms, her consciousness beginning to return. Around them, the facility continued to destabilize, sections of ceiling collapsing as dimensional stresses increased. "You're lying," Apache snarled at Mordecai. "If you could replicate Herribel Sama's energy, you wouldn't have needed to capture her in the first place." "Precision was required for the initial calibration," Mordecai acknowledged. "But now the pattern is set. And soon, the Fox of Six Paths will provide the catalyst needed for the second phase, willingly or otherwise." "You keep saying that," Naruto growled, "but I'm not interested in your convergence plan. And I'm definitely not volunteering to be your next battery." Mordecai raised a hand, and the dimensional tear behind him expanded, engulfing his hierarch at end dance and beginning to pull at everything in the chamber. "Your interest is irrelevant. The boundaries continue to thin. We will meet again when the second phase begins, in Las Noches itself." Before Naruto could respond, the ceiling directly above them gave way completely. Massive chunks of stone and crystal plummeted toward their group. Naruto reacted instantly, his chakra cloak expanding to form a protective shell around them all. The debris impacted with tremendous force, driving them to their knees but failing to breach the golden energy barrier. When the dust cleared, Mordecai was gone, the dimensional tear closed behind him. But their situation remained dire as the entire complex began a final, catastrophic collapse. "There," Mila Rose pointed to a secondary exit tunnel partially obscured by fallen equipment. "That should lead to the surface." They raced for the tunnel, Naruto still carrying Herribel while maintaining a smaller version of his chakra cloak to shield them from falling debris. Behind them, the central chamber imploded as dimensional forces tore it apart from within, creating a chain reaction that spread outward through the facility. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly as they ran, the sounds of destruction growing louder behind them. Finally, they burst out onto the desert surface, sprinting away from the installation as the ground beneath it began to sink inward. A final explosion of blue-white energy erupted skyward before the entire complex disappeared into a rapidly forming crater. Only when they had reached a safe distance did they stop to catch their breath and assess their situation. Naruto gently laid Herribel on the sand, supporting her head as she showed more signs of regaining consciousness. "Is she?" Apache began, unable to complete the question as she knelt beside her mistress. "She's alive," Naruto confirmed. "Her spiritual pressure is weak but stable. They drained a lot of her energy, but not enough to cause permanent damage." Herribel's eyes fluttered open, their teal depths momentarily unfocused before fixing on Naruto's face. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by confusion. "Naruto, Uzumaki," she murmured, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Welcome back," he replied with a relieved smile. "You had us worried." Herribel attempted to sit up, accepting Naruto's support when her strength proved insufficient. She looked around at the group, her Fracken hovering protectively nearby, the other Arankar maintaining a vigilant perimeter, and the scaled stranger watching with curious yellow eyes. "How long?" she asked simply. "Just over 2 weeks," Mila Rose supplied. "You were taken during the expedition to investigate the dimensional disturbances." Herribel nodded slowly, memories visibly returning. "Valeron. He betrayed us. And there was a masked entity, Mordecai," Naruto confirmed. "A fragment of the Soul King, apparently. He's trying to collapse the boundaries between dimensions, merge everything back into a single reality. Using my spiritual energy as an anchor point," Herribel concluded, the pieces falling into place. "I could feel it being drawn from me, used to calibrate some kind of mechanism." "That's pretty much exactly what happened," Naruto agreed. "We managed to free you, but Mordecai claims the first phase of his convergence plan is already complete. And now he's targeting Las Noches for the second phase." Alarm sharpened Herribel's features. "Las Noches? When?" "He didn't specify," Naruto admitted. "But the way he spoke, it sounded imminent." Herribel struggled to her feet, refusing Apache's attempt to make her rest longer. "Then we must return immediately. Las Noches cannot fall to Mordecai. The consequences would extend far beyond Hueco Mundo." "You're in no condition to travel at full speed," Mila Rose protested. "I will manage," Herribel stated with quiet authority. "The fortress must be prepared for what comes." They began the journey back to Las Noches, moving as quick Kaylee as Herribel's weakened condition permitted. Naruto stayed close to her side, ready to offer support if needed, though she stubbornly maintained her own pace despite obvious fatigue. As they traveled, Sazar shared what he knew of the ancient convergence from his world's texts, while Naruto updated Herribel on the changes implemented at Las Noches during her absence. She listened attentively, asking occasional questions that revealed her sharp strategic mind remained unaffected by her ordeal. "You organized the fortress's defense effectively," she observed after he explained the new patrol protocols and training regimens. "The Arankar respect strength, but they follow those who demonstrate wisdom in its application." "I just did what seemed necessary," Naruto replied with characteristic modesty. "Your Fracken were the ones who really held things together. They never stopped believing we'd find you." Herribel's gaze shifted to where Apache and Mila Rose led the group, their vigila. NCE never wavering despite their obvious relief at her rescue. "Their loyalty has always been their greatest strength. As has yours to your own people, from what you've told me." "Yeah, well," Naruto scratched the back of his head, a habit from his younger days that emerged in moments of unexpected praise. "Let's focus on getting you back to Las Noches safely. Then we can worry about Mordecai's next move." They continued in companionable silence for a time, the white sands of Hueco Mundo stretching endlessly around them. As Las Noches finally appeared on the distant horizon, however, they all sensed something was wrong. Even from miles away, they could see unnatural lights flashing around the fortress, the unmistakable glow of Cero blasts and combat. "They're already attacking," Apache realized, her pace automatically quickening. Herribel straightened, drawing on reserves of strength that shouldn't have existed after her captivity. "We must hurry. If Las Noches falls," her words were cut short by a tremendous explosion that lit up the horizon. A massive pillar of energy, identical to the one they had seen at the convergence site, erupted from the center of Las Noches, piercing the perpetual night sky of Hueco Mundo. "No," Herribel whispered, her voice tight with controlled emotion. They've established another convergence point. Inside Las Noches itself, Naruto added grimly. Exactly as Mordecai threatened. Without further discussion, they abandoned all caution and raced toward the embattled fortress, using Sonido and chakra-enhanced speed to cover the remaining distance as quickly as possible. As they drew closer, the scale of the attack became clear, hundreds of hollows and modified Arankar assaulting the walls from all sides, while Las Noches defenders fought desperately to repel them. They approached from the eastern side, where the battle appeared particularly fierce. Naruto created a vanguard of shadow clones to clear a path, while the Arankar in their Up prepared Sero blasts to provide covering fire. There's a secondary entrance through the outer wall, Herribel directed, pointing to a section of the fortress that appeared less heavily engaged. Quote, "We can enter there and make our way to the central dome." Fighting their way through the perimeter skirmishes proved easier than expected. Many of the attackers seemed confused by their arrival, hesitating just long enough to be overwhelmed. As they reached the secondary entrance, however, they encountered more organized resistance, a squad of the modified Arankar in crystalline armor forming a defensive line. Protecting their invasion route, Mila Rose surmised, drawing her Zanpakuto. They must have breached the fortress here first. The battle was brief but intense. Despite her weakened state, Herribel moved with deadly precision, her Zanpakuto cleaving through the crystalline armor of two opponents before they could react. Naruto engaged the largest of the defenders, using a combinatio N of taijutsu and carefully placed Rasengan strikes to shatter its defenses. With the entrance secured, they pressed inward, following the sounds of major combat toward the central dome. The corridors showed signs of fierce fighting, walls cratered by Sero impacts, floors stained with blood and spiritual residue. Occasionally they passed fallen defenders, some still clinging to life, whom they directed to fall back to safer positions. As they neared the throne room, they encountered Sung Sun and Lucian leading a group of defenders in a fighting retreat. Sung Sun's eyes widened at the sight of Herribel, momentary shock giving way to fierce joy. "Herribel-sama," she exclaimed, maintaining her composure better than many would have in her position. "You've returned. Report," Herribel commanded without preamble. "The attack began 2 hours ago," Lucian explained quickly. "Multiple breaches coordinated with internal sabotage. We held the outer defenses initially, but they deployed some kind of device that disrupted our spiritual pressure control. Dimensional compressors," Sazar interjected. "They force localized areas to conform to the spiritual laws of a specific dimension, neutral. Izing abilities that rely on different principles. Whatever they are, they allowed the enemy to push toward the central dome," Sung Sun continued. Mordecai himself appeared at the forefront, the Sam-E entity you described from the original encounter. He's established a convergence ritual in the throne room, using the Hogyoku fragment as a power source. "The fragment alone wouldn't provide sufficient energy," Herribel observed, concern deepening the lines around her eyes. "What else is he using?" Lucian's expression turned grim. "He brought sacrifices, captured Arankar and other dimensional beings. Their spiritual energy is being harvested to power the convergence. We have to stop him," Naruto declared, "before the process advances too far." "Agreed," Herribel said, "but we cannot simply attack directly. Mordecai clearly anticipated our return and will have prepared accordingly." They quickly devised a strategy. Herribel's Fracken would lead a diversionary assault on the throne room's secondary entrances, while Naruto, Herribel, and Sazar would approach through a maintenance passage that accessed the upper gallery. The remaining Arankar would secure their retreat route and prevent reinforcements from reaching Mordecai. As the groups separated to their assignments, Naruto found himself alone with Herribel for a brief moment. Her teal eyes studied him with an intensity that might have been uncomfortable from anyone else. "You led in my absence," she stated. "The Arankar followed you." Naruto shrugged slightly. "Only because they knew I was trying to find you. I just kept things together until we could bring you back." "Nevertheless," Herribel continued, "you assumed a responsibility that was not yours, in a realm not your own. Few would have done the same. I told Apache before, where I come from. Protecting people is what I do. It's who I am." He met her gaze directly. "And some people are worth crossing dimensions to save." Something flickered in Herribel's expression, a momentary softening that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Come, she said simply. We have a battle to win. The maintenance passage was narrow and poorly lit, forcing them to move in single file. Sazar took the lead, his superior night vision allowing him to navigate the darkness more effectively. Naruto followed, with Herribel bringing up the rear despite her protests that she was fully capable of leading. As they ascended toward the upper gallery, the ambient spiritual pressure grew increasingly distorted, similar to the effects they had experienced at the convergence site, but more intense. The very air seemed to shimmer with instability, occasional flickers of other landscapes momentarily superimposed over the familiar white corridors of Las Noches. The boundaries are already thinning, Sazar observed in a hushed voice. We must hurry. They finally reached the gallery overlooking the throne room, crouching low to avoid being seen as they assessed the situation below. What they saw confirmed their worst fears. The throne room had been transformed into a convergence site even more elaborate than the one they had destroyed. Obsidian pillars arranged in a perfect circle surrounded a central platform where the Hogyoku fragment hovered, pulsing with unnatural light. Around the perimeter, transparent crystals similar to the one that had imprisoned Herribel contained various beings, some Arankar, others clearly from different dimensions altogether. Their spiritual energy was being visibly drained, flowing in luminous streams toward the Hogyoku fragment. Standing at the center of it all was Mordecai, his smooth mask tilted upward toward the column of energy that rose from the fragment through an opening in the dome. 6 hierarchs moved around the circle, making adjustments to the apparatus and maintaining the flow of power. The second phase is nearly complete, Mordecai's voice echoed throughout the chamber, though he appeared to be speaking to no one in particular. The dimensional coordinates are aligning. Soon, the barriers will be thin enough for the final convergence to begin. How do we disrupt it? Naruto whispered, studying the setup for vulnerabilities. The Hogyoku fragment is the power source, Herribel replied softly. Remove it, and the entire system should collapse. But it's protected by some kind of barrier, Sazar noted, pointing to the faint shimmer surrounding the central platform. Similar to what we encountered at the previous site, but stronger. Naruto frowned in concentration. If it's like the last one, it'll have anchor points, probably those crystal structures at the base of each pillar. Before they could formulate a plan, the sound of combat erupted from the far side of the throne room, Herribel's Fracken initiating their diversion right on schedule. Sero blasts illuminated the chamber as they engaged the hierarchs guarding the secondary entrances. Mordecai didn't even turn to acknowledge the attack. With a negligent gesture, he directed 3 of his hierarchs to deal with the intruders while continuing his work at the central platform. Now's our chance, Naruto decided. While they're distracted, he created a dozen shadow clones, sending them to target the barrier anchor points simultaneously. Meanwhile, he, Herribel, and Sazar would drop directly to the floor below and approach the central platform from 3 different angles, maximizing their chances of breaking through to the Hogyoku fragment. The plan was set in motion with practiced precision. Naruto's clones launched their attacks against the anchor points while the 3 of them descended to the throne room floor. For a crucial few seconds, confusion reigned as the hierarchs attempted to address multiple threats simultaneously. Naruto charged directly toward Mordecai, golden chakra flaring around him as he drew on Kurama's power. The masked entity finally turned to acknowledge him, head tilting in that unnervingly inhuman manner. The Fox of 6 Paths arrives exactly when expected, Mordecai observed, his multi-toned voice somehow cutting through the chaos of battle. Your energy signature has been anticipated in our calculations. Sorry to disappoint, Naruto replied, forming a Rasengan that pulsed with 9 tails chakra, but I'm not here to be part of your convergence. He launched himself forward, aiming the spiraling sphere directly at Mordecai's mask. The entity made no move to dodge, instead raising a hand casually. The air between them distorted, and Naruto felt his momentum suddenly arise. Ted, as if he had slammed into an invisible wall. Your determination is admirable but misplaced, Mordecai stated. The convergence is inevitable, a correction of the fundamental flaw in reality's structure. Separate dimensions were never meant to exist. Across the chamber, Herribel engaged 2 hierarchs simultaneously, her Zanpakuto moving with lethal precision despite her still weakened state. Azar had reached one of the barrier anchor points and was applying some kind of corrosive substance from his scales that appeared to be eating through the crystalline structure. Naruto pushed harder against the invisible barrier, channeling more of Kurama's chakra. Golden energy surged around him, taking the form of a massive fox head that roared silently as it pressed against Mordecai's defense. Fascinating, the masked entity observed. Your spiritual composition contains elements from multiple dimensional paradigms, chakra, natural energy, and the beast's unique signature. You are already a convergence point in miniature. The barrier between them began to crack under the pressure of Naruto's assault. Mordecai finally moved, stepping back and making a complex gesture with both hands. The fractured air reassembled itself into a series of concentric rings that began to rotate around Naruto, contracting gradually to contain him. Your resistance is actually beneficial, Mordecai continued conversationally. It stimulates your energy output, providing exactly the catalyst we require. Naruto realized with alarm that the rings were somehow drawing on his chakra, siphoning it into the convergence system. The more he fought against them, the more energy they absorbed. He immediately ceased his attack, pulling his chakra cloak tight against his body to minimize the surface area exposed to the rings. Across the chamber, several things happened simultaneously. Sazar succeeded in destroying one of the barrier anchor points, creating a localized failure in the protective field. Herribel, having dispatched one hierarch and wounded another, saw the opening and moved with blinding speed toward the central platform. And from the secondary entrance, Apache, Mila Rose, and Sung Sun broke through the defensive line, combining their powers into a single, devastating attack. Chimera Parka, they called in unison, their spiritual pressure merging to form the massive chimera-like being Aeon. The monstrous creation charged directly toward the convergence apparatus, its raw power and bestial instinct making it nearly impossible to control or predict. Mordecai's attention split between these multiple threats. The momentary distraction was all Naruto needed. Instead of fighting the energy-draining rings, he formed a shadow clone inside their perimeter, a technique that required precision rather than raw power. The clone immediately used the transformation jutsu to assume Mordecai's appearance. The rings, calibrated to Naruto's specific energy signature, failed to recognize the transformed clone as a threat. In the confusion, Naruto slipped through a gap between them, launching himself toward the central platform where the Hogyoku fragment pulsed with increasing intensity. Herribel reached it just before he did, her Zanpakuto already swinging toward the crystal housing that contained the fragment. A hierarch appeared between them, energy staff raised to block her strike. Naruto came in from the opposite side, a normal-sized Rasengan in hand, not the chakra-intensive version that would feed the convergence, but precisely focused and deadly. The Rasengan struck the crystal housing dead center, creating a network of fractures across its surface. Herribel's Zanpakuto found its mark a split second later, completing the destruction. The Hogyoku fragment hung suspended for a moment, its inner light flickering erratically. Now, Sazar, Naruto shouted. The scaled being had positioned himself directly beneath the fragment. At Naruto's signal, he spat a glob of Scouse fluid upward, some kind of natural compound from his home dimension. When it contacted the fragment, a chemical reaction began immediately, the fragment's surface turning dull and opaque as the substance neutralized its power. No, Mordecai's voice lost its calm for the first time, taking on a note of genuine alarm. The second phase is incomplete. The convergence apparatus began to fail, energy flows becoming erratic as their power source destabilized. The column of light connecting to the sky above fluctuated wildly before collapsing inward. Around the perimeter, the crystals containing the sacrificial beings shattered, releasing their captives. Mordecai moved with unexpected speed, appearing beside the dying fragment. "This delays nothing," he declared, his voice regaining its eerie composure. "The process has advanced too far to be stopped completely. The dimensional thinning continues even without the anchor point." With a gesture that seemed to tear at the very fabric of space, he opened a dimensional rift beside him, not the controlled, circular portal of a Garganta, but a jagged wound in reality itself. "We shall meet again at the final convergence, Fox of Six Paths. Your role is not yet complete." Before anyone could prevent it, Mordecai stepped through the rift, taking the neutralized Hogyoku fragment with him. The tear sealed behind him with a sound like breaking glass, leaving the throne room in sudden, relative quiet. The remaining hierarchs, seeing their master departed and their ritual ruined, attempted to flee through similar rifts. Some succeeded, while others fell to the combined attacks of the Las Noches defenders. Within minutes, the battle had ended, the invasion force outside the fortress breaking apart without Mordecai's coordinating influence. Naruto found Herribel standing at the center of the ruined convergence apparatus, surveying the destruction with an unreadable expression. The throne room, symbol of Las Noches' power and stability, lay in shambles around them. Sections of the dome missing entirely to reveal the perpetual night sky of Hueco Mundo. "He's right, isn't he?" Naruto asked, coming to stand beside her. "This isn't over." "No," Herribel agreed quietly. "The dimensional barriers continue to thin. This was merely a battle in a larger war." Around them, the survivors of Las Noches were already beginning to regroup, tending to the wounded, securing prisoners. Assessing damage, Herribel's Fracken hovered nearby, their relief at their mistress's safe return tempered by concern for her still weakened condition. "Herribel-sama," Sung-sun approached cautiously. "The fortress is secure for now, but we've received reports of similar attacks at other locations in Hueco Mundo. Mordecai appears to have established multiple convergence points simultaneously." Herribel nodded, processing this information with characteristic calm. "Coordinate with our allies at the other strongholds. We must share what we've learned about disrupting the convergence process." As Sung-sun departed to carry out these instructions, Herribel turned back to Naruto. "You fought well," she observed. "Again. So did you," he replied with a slight smile. "Especially for someone who was being used as a dimensional battery a few hours ago." A hint of amusement flickered in her teal eyes, the closest thing to a smile he had yet seen from her. "Recovery will be necessary. For all of us." She glanced around at the destruction, her expression turning more serious. "Las Noches must be rebuilt, stronger than before. The next attack will come sooner than we might hope. And I'll be here to help," Naruto promised, then hesitated. "Unless you'd prefer I focus on finding my way home." Herribel studied him for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. "I believe our fates are now intertwined, Naruto Uzumaki. Mordecai sees you as essential to his convergence plan, which makes your presence here both a risk and an opportunity. Besides," she added, her tone softening almost imperceptibly, "Las Noches has benefited from your leadership in my absence. The Arrancar respect you. They follow you," Naruto corrected. "I was just keeping your seat warm." This time, Herribel's mouth did curve slightly beneath her high collar, a genuine, if restrained, smile. "Perhaps leadership need not rest with a single individual. Hueco Moon. Du's future may depend on new approaches to old problems." Before Naruto could respond, Lucian approached with urgent news, reports of dimensional rifts opening spontaneously across Hueco Mundo, bringing more displaced beings like Sazar from their home realms. Some arrived hostile and confused, others seeking understanding and alliance. "We should establish protocols for these arrivals," Herribel decided. "Not all will be enemies. And some may possess knowledge or abilities useful against Mordecai." As the immediate crisis gave way to the challenges of recovery and preparation, Naruto found himself naturally assuming a role alongside Herribel, neither subordinate nor superior, but partner. Together they directed the cleanup efforts, organized investigation teams to study the remnants of the convergence apparatus, and established new security measures throughout the fortress. Days passed, and Las Noches gradually returned to a state of operational readiness. The damaged sections of the fortress were repaired, often with improvements designed specifically to resist the dimensional technologies Mordecai had employed. Training regimens were established to prepare defenders for the UE challenges of fighting beings from other dimensions, with Naruto and Sazar offering insights from their respective worlds. Throughout it all, Naruto found himself growing increasingly aware of Herribel's presence, her quiet strength, her unwavering dedication to protecting those under her authority, and the rare moments when her reserve softened to reveal glimpses of the person beneath the leader. One evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the inner courtyard where Arrancar troops trained, Naruto broached a subject that had been on his mind since their return. During the convergence ritual, he began. "Mordecai said something about me being a convergence point in miniature, having elements from multiple dimensional paradigms." Herribel nodded, her gaze still on the training below. "I've observed the unique nature of your abilities. Your chakra operates on principles distinct from our spiritual pressure, yet interacts with it in ways that shouldn't be possible across dimensional boundaries. That's what I've been thinking about, Naruto continued. If my energy can already bridge dimensional gaps, maybe it could be used to find a way home without tearing reality apart. Herribel turned to him then, her teal eyes searching his face. You wish to return to your world. It wasn't a question, but Naruto answered anyway. I have people there who depend on me. Friends who would be worried about my disappearance. He paused, then added more softly, but I also feel responsible for what's happening here. Mordecai wants me for his convergence, which means I'm part of this fight whether I like it or not. A difficult balance, Herribel observed. Duty to your home versus obligation to worlds you never chose to enter. Yeah, Naruto agreed, though honestly, it's no. Just obligation keeping me here anymore. Their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Neither pushed the moment further, but something had shifted, an acknowledgement of a connectee. On that transcended their shared battle against a common enemy. The silence that followed was comfortable, broken only when Apache appeared to report that the dimensional research team had made a significant discovery. In the remnants of the convergence apparatus, they had found what appeared to be a map, a schematic of the various dimensions connected to Hueco Mundo, with markers indicating existing and planned convergence points. This could allow us to predict Mordecai's next move, Herribel realized, studying the recovered data. And possibly locate his primary base of operations. If we can find where he's coordinating from, we might be able to stop the convergence process entirely, Naruto added, the tactical implications immediately clear to him. What neither of them said, but both understood, was that such a mission would be extraordinarily dangerous, requiring them to venture directly into whatever pocket dimension Mordecai had claimed as his sanctuary. It would mean leaving Las Noches vulnerable, albeit temporarily, and risking everything on a single, decisive strike. As they discussed the possibilities with their inner circle of advisors, the strategic necessity became increasingly clear. A defensive posture would only delay the inevitable as dimensional barriers continued to thin. They needed to take the fight to Mordecai directly. We'll need a specialized team, Herribel decided finally. Small enough to move undetected, but powerful enough to confront Mordecai on his own territory. I assume you'll be leading this mission personally, Lucian observed, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. Herribel nodded. Along with Naruto, our combined abilities offer the best chance of success. My Fracken will accompany us, she continued, forestalling their inevitable insistence. As will Sazar, whose knowledge of dimensional phenomena has proven invaluable. The rest of you will maintain Las Noches in our absence, under Lucian's authority. The planning continued late into the night, every detail considered and contingency addressed. They would depart in 3 days, after final preparations were complete and Las Noches defenses fully restored. The mission would either end the threat of convergence permanently or accelerate it beyond their ability to control. There would be no middle ground. As the meeting concluded and the others departed, Naruto found himself alone with Herribel once more. The weight of their impending mission hung between them, along with all that remained unsaid. You should rest, Herribel suggested, noting the fatigue he had been trying to conceal. The coming days will demand our full strength. Probably, Naruto agreed with a slight smile. But first, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. Herribel tilted her head slightly, waiting. During the battle at the convergence site, when I was trying to free you from the crystal, he began, searching for the right words. There was a moment when our energies connected. Like they recognized each other somehow. Did you feel that too? Something flickered in Herribel's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or confirmation of her own experience. Yes, she admitted. It was as if our spiritual signatures harmonized in a way that should not be possible between beings from different dimensions. I've been thinking about what that might mean, Naruto continued. Mordecai keeps talking about using us as anchor points because our energies have some special quality. But what if that same quality could be used against him? What if the connection between us is actually a weapon he never anticipated? Herribel considered this, her analytical mind visibly processing the implications. A counterpoint to convergence, using the same principles to stabilize Wrath. Then collapse the dimensional barriers. Exactly, Naruto nodded, encouraged by her understanding. Instead of fighting dimensional physics, we work with them, create a balanced system that maintains separation while allowing controlled interaction. It would require precise control of our combined energies, Herribel observed. And a deep understanding of the connective principles Mordecai is exploiting. Which is why we need to see his operation firsthand, Naruto concluded. Not just to stop him, but to learn enough to develop an alternative. Herribel studied him with new appreciation. Your strategic thinking continues to surprise me, Naruto Uzumaki. He grinned, scratching the back of his head in that characteristic gesture. I have my moments, usually when the stakes are high enough. Indeed, Herribel's expression softened fractionally. We should discuss this theory further with Sazar tomorrow. For now, however, rest is essential. As they parted ways for the night, Naruto felt a curious mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The coming mission would determine not just the fate of multiple dimensions, but possibly his own future as well, whether he would return to his home world or remain in this strange realm where he had found unexpected purpose and connection. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and final arrangements. Equipment was gathered, strategies refined, and contingency plans established for every scenario they could envision. Through it all, Naruto and Herribel worked in seamless coordination, their complementary abilities ND perspectives creating solutions neither would have developed alone. On the morning of their departure, Las Noches stood prepared, both for their absence and for whatever might follow their confrontation with Mordecai. As the specialized team gathered at the eastern gate, Lucian approached with a final report on fortress readiness. All defensive systems are at maximum capacity, he assured Herribel. The new dimensional stabilizers have been installed at key points throughout Las Noches, which should prevent any further convergence attempts in your absence. Herribel nodded, satisfaction evident despite her reserved expression. Maintain regular patrols beyond the walls as well. If Mordecai attempts to divert our attention with a secondary attack, I want early warning. Of course, Herribel-sama. Lucian's gaze shifted to include Naruto. Both of you return safely. Las Noches has grown accustomed to dual leadership in recent weeks. The observation caught Naruto by surprise. He had simply done what needed doing. Working alongside Herribel without consideration for formal authority. Yet looking around at the assembled Arankar, he saw acknowledgement in their eyes, respect earned thr. Ao shared hardship and demonstrated capability. As the expedition party moved beyond Las Noches walls into the endless desert of Hueco Mundo, Naruto fell into step beside Herribel, their path lit by the perpetual crescent moon overhead. Whatever awaited them in Mordecai's domain, they would face it together, the Fox of Six Paths and the Queen of Hollow Seas, united against the coming storm. Chapter 2 End.